This is Matthew Keenan with you, and as dramatic as the opening week of racing has been, it's here in the mountains that the race for yellow really gets underway. Before the start, there were statues erected across the 102 editions of the Tour de France, and denoting many of the past winners, including Bernard Thévenet, who won twice, 75 and 77. Greg LeMond, who won in 1986. Bernard Hinault, a five-time winner of the race. Stephen Roche, the winner of the Tour in 1987. LeMond, in fact, a three-time winner of the Tour de France, 86, 89 and 90. And Avmet in third position, Sagan fourth, Contador in fifth, Rigoberto Urán sixth, Valverde, Quintana also inside the top 10. Peter Sagan with a 3-point buffer in the race for the green jersey, ahead of Andre Greipel. King of the Mountains classification, that is Daniel Tecla-Haminont. He's on 4 points versus the 2 of Rodriguez, but this is where the climbing really starts and the battle for that jersey commences. The white jersey for the best young rider, it's with Peter Sagan. 1:21 is the advantage over Nairo Quintana. Then it's into the Pyrenees from Tarbes to La Pierre-Saint-Martin. It's a stage of 167 kilometres. There's 3 Category 4 climbs to get things started. Then they go up the final climb, which is an Oars category climb, and it takes them to some 1,700 metres in altitude. It's a difficult climb. It's a first-time adventure here for the Tour de France. And let's not forget that it is the 14th of July, so the French will have some high ambitions. The white jersey has been worn by Nairo Quintana, the man who finished in that jersey in Paris 2 years ago. Although he sits in second place, Peter Sagan has the responsibility of wearing green. Alberto Contador in the colours of Tinkoff Saxo. A difficult day for them yesterday with Ivan Basso heading home, having been diagnosed with testicular cancer. And like the rest of the cycling community, we wish the Italian all the best. Situation of the race, 2 men out in front. Sitting at the back is Peric Federigo, who is the best placed of these 2 in the overall standings at 34 minutes and 31 seconds behind. And he's joined by the Belgian on debut at the Tour de France. It is Kenneth Van Bilsen, who rides at the front in red. 14 minutes and 29 seconds, or 28 seconds their advantage. This is the biggest lead we've seen for any breakaway throughout this year's Tour de France. No surprise to see a Frenchman in the break, and a former French national champion who's tasted plenty of success in this part of the country. He's won 4 stages in his career at the Tour de France, Peric Federigo, and most of them in this region. Another one across in the Alps in Gap, where we head to for the second rest day. Peloton today under the control of Team Sky with Chris Froome. No longer waiting for the teams of the sprinters to look after the chase of the breakaway. It is a battle for yellow this afternoon. And for Chris Froome, he has said before the stage got underway today, I'm in a good position, I'll defend it. He's got every right to. He sits on the wheel of Peter Kenyak, Richie Portes, Leo Koenig, Wout Poels. They're the men we'll be looking for to protect Chris Froome throughout today's stage. Chris Froome has declared that he considers TJ Van Garderen and Nairo Quintana as his 2 main rivals. Tony Galopin in the red colours. Man who won a stage last year and had a 1-day stint in the yellow jersey. He's having a conversation with Brice Feillu from the Breton Sachet team. Feillu, also a stage winner in the Tour de France. That was way back in 2009 and his first attempt at the race. Well, the major news coming out of the rest day yesterday was the abandonment of the race of Ivan Basso, who had what would prove to be the most fortunate crash of his career. The Italian, who's been a dual winner of the Giro d'Italia, a second-place finisher here at the Tour de France, and a teammate of Alberto Contador, Basso crashed on stage 5 and said that he hurt his testicle, and it still hurt for another 2 days, so they figured they'd better get it checked out. And then he got the news yesterday, just 2 hours before the press conference for Tinkoff Saxo, that he had early stages of testicular cancer. The good news is it's been caught early and we wish him all the best. Peter Sagan in the green jersey today, and as always having a little bit of fun. It won't be too much fun once we get closer to this final climb on today's stage, Le Pied Saint-Martin. And Peter Sagan, there is one intermediate sprint on today's stage, and that comes before we hit the big climb, obviously, given that that takes us to the finish line. It's with 43 kilometres remaining. It's after they go over the first 2 Category 4 climbs of today's stage. And I suspect that we'll see Peter Sagan in amongst the action. They've been over the first climb of today's stage, the Côte de Bourget. It's a Category 4 climb, and Van Bilsen in the leading group of 2 led them across the top of the climb. Here he is, the 25-year-old Belgian. And when Daniel Tecla-Harmonot took the King of the Mountains jersey, it was in a breakaway with Van Bilsen, and those two were sprinting to the top of each of the climbs to try and collect the points. Number 204, the experienced Frenchman. This is Perique Fedrigo. He's won 4 stages in his career at the Tour de France, and one of them, back in 2009, was into Tarbes, where the stage started today. He's also won 2 stages into Pau, where the rest day was yesterday. His first stage victory, well, that came in 2006 into Gap, where we head to in the 3rd week of racing. When you've won as often as Perique Fedrigo, it's no surprise that you're going back to a territory where you have had success in the past. 21 victories throughout his career for a man who turned professional with the Crédit Agricole team back in 2001. So he's had a long and distinguished career. Ever reliable Perique Fedrigo. And for the Cofidis team, another opportunity for them to get a little bit of exposure. It's been a disappointing race for what has been a big investment financially. And it comes down to the crashes, the bad luck for Nacer Bouhanni. Unfortunately, had to abandon the race after a few nasty falls. Into the town of Bourget. And this church that we can see, it's in the centre of town, that was built in the 17th century. That little tower that you can see was the beginnings of the town, which was established in around about 1380. Not sure what the size of the population is, but I can assume it's fairly small. The Tower of Bourget. It was the first building of note within this town, as I mentioned just a moment ago, back in 1380. Back to the peloton with 2 riders from Movistar on the front supporting Team Sky, and we move into the territory of Nairo Quintana. He's a minute and 59 seconds down in the overall standings, the Colombian sitting in 9th position overall. Minute and 59 seconds, it's a lot of time to make up, but he is capable of doing it. If anybody in this race is, it is Nairo Quintana. When he made his debut in the Tour de France, he headed into the final week a fair way off the pace, and he clawed back some significant time on Chris Froome. He was the only one really to challenge in the mountains. The rider on the right-hand side of the screen with the British flag around his sleeves, that's Ian Stannard. They'll be using Stannard earlier on, but the next one in line with the very skinny arms is Wout Poels. A Dutchman, a new recruit across to this team, and he's one of the riders on Team Sky who's pretty happy with the confirmation that Richie Porte will be leaving the team at the end of the season. And it's nothing to do with his view of Richie Porte or having a negative or positive relationship with Richie Porte. He's pretty keen, Wout Poels, to put his hand up to be the man that leads Team Sky at the Giro d'Italia next year. Across the top of the climb, the first Category 4 climb on today's stage. 14 minutes and 34 seconds is the gap. I'm not sure that Wout Poels will automatically be the team leader for Sky at the Giro next year, because that's a team that's also got Leo Koning on the squad, who rode the Giro this year for the first time and finished in 6th position.
Fine, welcome on.
Not just for the stage victory because it's the Tour de France, but the stage victory because it's the Tour de France and it's right on the Spanish border. And there are lots of Spanish spectators here and plenty of Basques as well. You'll see quite a few of the spectators on the side of the road today wearing the orange jersey of the now defunct Euskadal Euskadi, but it's like the national jersey of the Basque country. Van Bilsen in the red colours. Fedrigo is the rider in the black and green. Stage started in Tarbes today, and it was there that Prig Fedrigo was the stage winner in 2009. There's nothing flashy about Prig Fedrigo, very workmanlike, just gets the job done. It was on stage 8 to the Mur de Bretagne where we saw the race start to split up after the intermediate sprint, where it was Prig Fedrigo who was one of the first ones there looking for the opportunity to drive home the advantage. It would be a great result and one that the French would really cheer about if that squad, the smallest team in the race, were able to pick up a stage victory. Still Iverti sitting on the front. We haven't seen BMC Racing need to do too much of this throughout the Tour so far. Their team leader TJ Van Garderen, he has said that his strength is his consistency. And he will not be out there trying to attack the likes of Quintana or Contador on the climbs, but just presents itself, then to take any big risk from Van Garderen. TJ was part of BMC back in 2011 when Cadel Evans won the race, and he said the way they've ridden so far is very much following the template that was set by Evans 4 years ago. They've been up the front, out of trouble, calculated efforts, no energy wasted. And Rowan Dennis, the Australian on that squad, has played an enormous role. Speaking with Bob Roll from American television over lunch before beginning the broadcast, he was very impressed with Rowan Dennis, and he was of the view that it was Dennis who was the difference between BMC finishing first or second, in fact first or third. And Bob Roll calculated that Rowan Dennis, across the last 6 kilometres of that team time trial, probably spent about 5 of it on the front with his nose in the wind. Chase is on now. The peloton is strung out in single file down to 13 minutes and 53 seconds. The advantage now for our 2 leaders, Van Bilsen and Fedrigo. Well, one man who'll be pretty happy with seeing Van Bilsen off the front is Sean Kelly, as Van Bilsen spent a season with Sean Kelly's development team back in 2012. He then spent a couple of years with Topsport Vlaanderen, which is the Belgian equivalent of an Australian Institute of Sport or the British Cycling Academy. It supports young riders just making the transition into the professional ranks. And this year, at the age of 25, Van Bilsen has shifted across to the French team Cofidis. He now has made his debut in the Tour de France, and we've seen a bit of him. Movistar chasing, Team Sky waiting. Richie Porte sitting behind Leo Koning. Leo Koning having some lunch. He will be crucial to the prospects of Chris Froome throughout this year's race. And Leo Koning is a potential Grand Tour winner himself in the future. This is his 4th participation in a Grand Tour. The 3 that he's ridden so far and finished: Tour of Spain, 9th in 2013. Tour de France last year, 7th. Giro d'Italia, Tour of Italy this year, 6th. They're good numbers for Koning. Number 35, Richie Porte. Where will he be next season? He's declared that he is leaving Team Sky. He's staying loyal to Chris Froome. He wants to support his friend win his 2nd Tour de France. But he also wants to be a leader in his own right. many have noted how relaxed Chris Froome looks at this year's tour. Even Froome has noted it himself that he feels a lot more relaxed, certainly than he was at the start of last year's tour. And even in 2013, he came into the tour having won pretty much every race he started throughout the start of the season. And he did feel the pressure because he was trying to fill the shoes of Bradley Wiggins, who had won the Tour the year before for the Sky Squad. This year, there hasn't been that much of a focus on Froome. There's been a lot more attention to Quintana and Contador and Nibali as the defending champion. And many had discounted the prospects of Froome because of how difficult the first week was. Crosswinds, pavé, the rain that played a part as well. Froome handled them perfectly. There'll be no room to hide today, though. Those crosswinds, the team played a crucial role for Froome, as it did for Van Garderen, likewise Alberto Contador. But as the American TJ Van Garderen has said himself, up until now, sure, we have been able to hide and use the team. In the mountains, we can't hide. It's us, the gradients, gravity, and our rivals. He will like those numbers, and now with the peloton going through the feed zone, the gap for the leading two, it might shift back out to almost that 14-minute mark. Rider with the tattoos coming up towards the front, that is winner Anacona. One of two Colombians on the team. He was brought across to the squad to support the #1 man, Nairo Quintana. Anacona, his name Winner, is the result of a spelling mistake on his birth certificate. It was meant to be Winning, named after Peter Winning, the Dutchman who won twice to the top of Alpe d'Huez back in the late 70s, the early 80s. Anacona's father was a keen cycling fan. His middle name is Andrew, after Andrew Hampston, or Andy Hampston, who won to the top of Alpe d'Huez back in 1992. Winner himself last year, riding with the Lampre team. He was a winner indeed at the Tour of Spain. He won a mountaintop finish there, his first stage victory in a Grand Tour. But here he's just interested in supporting Nairo Quintana. Back to the breakaway group of two. Van Bilsen in the red colours. It is Fredrigo sitting at the back in the green and black. He's very stocky, Peric Fredrigo. He doesn't carry any excess weight. He's just naturally very muscular. And he's not a man for the high mountains, but his stage victories generally come on stages where they're going through the medium mountains. He's won twice in Po, he's won in Gap, and he's won in Tarbes. Chris Froome in the yellow jersey, he has all the elements to show he's the big boss of the tour. Today is a climb to clean out his adversaries.
I don't think we're going to see, big moves from the favourites. It could be one where someone can get away, but one thing is for sure, the pace is going to be very high, and all those who've lost time, Nairo, Contador, Nibali above all, have got a point to make today.
Plus que le vainqueur du jour, aujourd'hui, on va attendre le perdant du jour.
Today, we won't see who wins the Tour de France, but we'll see who loses the Tour. And the bad signs for Warren Barguil on the ground are that his teammates are riding off. They're continuing, and he does not look as if he is moving. He's sitting in 14th position overall at the start of the day. He had hopes of finishing inside the top 10, looking for a stage victory. It was a stage win at the Tour of Spain on debut 2 years ago. A top 10 finish there last year. He is bracing the hip and the leg. Sad signs for the 23-year-old Frenchman. And it was just on the exit of the feed zone. He proved his bike handling skills to be second to none amongst the climbers. On stage 4, we consistently saw him at the front across the pavé, and in fact, he was attacking more so than what we saw from Vincenzo Nibali. Up quickly and down almost as quickly as soon as he found himself a soft landing. By the looks of it, tangled up with the teammates. Warren Barguil is a former winner of the Tour de l'Avenir, a race that is considered the race of the future. Win that and you might be a contender for the Tour de France. Nairo Quintana is another example of a past winner, one of the favourites this year. Barguil showing his courage. He's about to remount, the helmet is on. Unfortunately, his two teammates that had waited with him, they've gone up the road. I suggest if he's any chance to rejoin the race today, they'll have to wait for him. They build them tough in Brittany. Now Warren Barguil will be tested. He said he enjoyed the experience across the cobblestones. He enjoyed the crosswinds. It's his first time doing those two things at this level and doing them well. And it gave him confidence coming into the mountains. And this morning he said, I'm looking forward to the climbing stages. Bit of disappointment for Warren Barguil. The picture tells the story. Physical pain and the emotional anguish for Barguil. The race doctor has also got the job on his hands.
The gap and the South African flags flying here as well as we come up to the top. Winner takes all, and it looks like another point for Kenneth van Bilsen. He's now scored 2 points in the King of the Mountains competition.
Yeah, well, he was the first over the previous climb. The important thing to note, Phil, is there are massive points available on the finishing line here, because on a certain number of the mountaintop finishes in the Tour de France this year, there are double points available, and it's an outside categorized climb. This climb here up to La Pierre Saint-Martin, and there are 50 points for the winner in the King of the Mountains competition. So I think it's fair to say that there will be a new leader tonight.
And he'll be the winner of the stage, that's for sure. Average over the second hour of the race today slowed down a little bit. It was sitting at 45.6. It's dropped back to 41.8, and by consequence the average for the 2 hours is now 43.7. Still a quick day of racing, Paul.
Very quick.
And still faster than the organisers expected, so they're going pretty quickly.
Yes, and sad to see that accident of Warren Barguil, one of those sort of mundane crashes that happens any day in the Tour de France, but he went down very hard. It took him some time to have the doctor look after him and get himself back into the race, and currently he's still hovering off the back end of the main field and hoping to stay in the Tour. And I would have put him down as a dark horse to do something on today's stage, because in the past, in the Vuelta a España a couple of years ago, he won 2 dramatic stages, and funnily enough the weather conditions when he won were atrocious. It was very cold and wet, unlike today.
Well, the breakaway are not going to concern the main field. They're continuing their in-fight, as they will now wait for probably the start of the climb to try and break up the field.
Just in memory here as we look down, now this is the former camp of the French internment. 64,000 people were interned here during the Second World War, and around about 1,072 of them lost their lives.
And the ride is actually racing down past this today as we head into the heart of the mountains. This is the cemetery of those people where the 1,072 graves are, as we now make our way onwards. These Pyrenean rivers here, and where we're talking to at the finishing line, we have underground caves spread over a massive area of over 450 kilometres. It's the biggest cave, one of the biggest cave systems in the world, and of course many of the Pyrenean rivers course underneath us before finding their way into the open air.
Well, that river we just looked at down there, Phil, was the Gave d'Oléron, and a lot of the rivers in this region of France are called Les Gaves. So just looking, we're about 3 minutes behind for Warren Barguil, and it's going to be tough for him to get back into the main field on a day like this. He's at the back of the race, severely injured after a nasty little tumble as we went through the small town of Mourenx just a few moments ago. On the front, Alex Dowsett, you can recognise him from the helicopter here. You can see the bandage on his right hand elbow. That's from an accident he had a couple of days ago. His team finished third in the team time trial on the eve of the rest day. Just about 4 seconds adrift, and a very impressive performance, which had the effect of pretty much moving Nairo Quintana back up into a threatening position. He's 9th overall, Quintana, just inside of 2 minutes, but he knows how important today's stage is for him. It's a mountaintop finish, and he'll be looking to try and get some time back on Chris Froome if he can.
Well, the helicopters trace over the beautiful Gave River here as the Tour de France now is bound for the high mountains for the first time, and sadly one of the great French hopes, sitting 14th in the race, Warren Barguil, is still trying to rejoin after what looked like a rather heavy fall. Meanwhile, it is the team of Movistar. The centre picture here is that with the bandaged elbow is Alex Dowsett, the rider from Essex, who's trying to drive this race in favour now of his team leader, and that, I think, Paul, might well upset the apple cart, because Alex, of course, is going to have to ride against Chris Froome today.
Well, he certainly will.
Riders from Movistar. Now, the rumour is rife all over the finishing line compound today that Movistar are going to launch an attack at the base of the climb today and try and move up near Quintana. That's the plan, and this is the best territory for them right now. They'll have a lot of support here on the last climb.
These two riders, it took them a long time to get together. I thought it was very strange because, in fact, the man who made the move is a rider on the front, Peric Federigo, in that green and black jersey of the Bretagne Sèche Environnement team. And in fact, for a long time, the rider in the red, the Belgian rider, Kenneth van Bilsen, who was chasing, couldn't quite make the junction. I would have thought that the team management would have said, "Oi, wait for the guy behind, because you've got a long way to go to the final climb of the day, and 2 pairs of legs are a little bit better than 1.
It took him 43 kilometres to close a gap of just about 1 minute, and for a long time he was only 20 seconds behind, and still Federigo wouldn't wait for him. Anyway, they got together at 50 kilometres. They pushed the lead out to 14:47. As you can see, this reaction coming now has brought it back to 12 minutes and 13 as we're arriving to the town of Navarrenx. And people are asking us what the number means there. Well, number 64 is the number of the Department of France.
Yeah, there are 95 departments in France, by the way. And 75 is the number of Paris, but it's going to take them an awful long time before they actually get up there. A river they just went over, by the way, the Gave d'Oloron, is 150 kilometres long and makes its way up through Les Landes, which is a very flat part of France, just south of Bordeaux. And it comes from its source in Oloron-Sainte-Marie. Well, this time the race goes uphill. He's got to try and go out on the attack, so that's why we've got Movistar very, very keenly setting this pace. Quick look there at the clock. We've got a little chance here every now and again to get into the race, and those little black boxes you can see under the riders' saddles, those give us a certain amount of information. The GPS information there says that Alex Dowsett was riding just inside of 40 kilometres an hour. The average speed of the race so far has been 45 kilometres now, but we covered almost 50 kilometres in the first hour of racing. It's a strange day to try and figure out the tactics today, because it's basically a pan-flat stage until you get to the town at the bottom of today's climb, and then it's uphill, and it's a very, very savage climb. It's a fairly steady climb with an average gradient of between 8 and 9%, but the middle section, there are a couple of percentages creep up to in excess of 10%, and that's, I think, where we might see the move coming from Nairo Quintana.
As they must have gone off to do some work.
Well, it's really nice to see this young man getting himself back into the main field. When I saw him on the ground for a couple of minutes with the race doctor up alongside him, I had to think in the back of my mind that he wasn't going to get up. He looked really badly banged up. But as we say so many times, this is the Tour de France. This is a special event. You certainly do not want to abandon other events. If you get a nasty little crash like that, you just might get demoralised and say, oh, well, forget it. I'll go home and get better for the next race. But this race only comes around once a year. It is the biggest and the best, and this youngster, well, at 23 years of age, it's his first participation in the Tour de France. He's He's ridden Grand Tours before. In fact, on 2 occasions he's ridden the Tour of Spain. 2 years ago he won 2 Pyrenean stages, and last year he finished in 8th place overall, and at the start of today he was in 13th.
Well, he's back now, Paul. Now he's got to try and recover. This day will become one of more recovery now than thinking of attacking, I suspect.
Well, you know, this race never ceases to amaze me, Phil, because when we saw Warren Barguil on the floor and the doctor looking after him, I thought, well, that's it. It's all over and done and dusted. He's not going to get back onto his machine. But, you know, after the doctor had looked at him and had a quick talk to him, he obviously felt he could carry on. But what a long, hard chase to get himself back into the main field. And fingers crossed that he nurses his body through the next part of the stage. Really quite pretty. It's a beautiful part of the region. That's in the middle of the roundabout in Navarinx. We go back to the leaders. The gap has come down. They got themselves almost a 15-minute advantage. Number 20 just on the back of the car there. That's the place in the convoy. Their team car number 20. And that's because their best placed rider is 20th in the number of riders. But it's a team that we didn't expect to be too high. They had a very difficult team time trial. And getting a chance. We're really now starting to see very much of the Basque architecture as we move deeper into the Pyrenees. The finish of today's stage is not very far away from Spain. In fact, if you got up to the top of the climb and took a turn to the right instead of coming into the finishing straight, you could carry on and go right over the top and drop down into Spain. The sprint point is at Troisville. And that's an extremely important sprint point for riders like André Greipel. They realise they've got to keep chipping away at the points. Greipel has dropped down a fraction in that competition. He's 3 points behind Peter Sagan. Cavendish moved up with his victory a couple of days ago. He's up into 3rd place in that competition at 159 points. He's just 1 point ahead of John Degenkolb. And that, in fact, as we speak about Mark Cavendish, just had a little mechanical. Cavendish has said that he's pretty happy now to look forward to the mountains. It takes a little bit of the stress off him from the first week of the race. He's not panicking. He's back on his machine. And we are about 15 kilometres to go to the sprint point. Well, 15 kilometres to the sprint point for the breakaway group. And that is once they go through the small town of Troisville. 3 towns. Very rarely do you get a chance to see the Pyrenees looking quite so beautiful as they look today. And I wondered when we came out of the hotel this morning, because there was a low mist in all of the valleys. And as we climbed up the mountain here, all of a sudden we got out of the mist and into the tree line.
Above the clouds and into beautiful sunshine. It's really nice and pleasantly warm.
Well, these are days when it's very difficult if you have a little bit of a mechanical or a crash on the flat part of the course, because you've got a high average speed, and if you stand at the side of the road for a couple of minutes, it takes an awful long time to get back into the race. In fact, the race doctor was calling for Warren Barguil, so the rider from Giant Alpecin come back to the race doctor again to get looked after just a little bit more.
They're going to put a bandage on his arm.
So just checking back on Barguil. Get him, now that he's actually got through the problem of getting himself back into the main peloton, he's going to have slightly better attendance from the race doctor. The race doctor does a fantastic job. There are 7 doctors actually at the race level who look after the riders if they were to have a problem in the race, and 3 of them actually involved in the publicity caravan a little further up the road. A couple of ambulances as well who are ready on hand all of the time to look after the riders. It really has to be done on the run like this. The most important thing is to get back up and get back into the race as quickly as possible, and then if you get back into contact with the main field, then you can get yourself looked after properly. It was a nasty little tumble. It was part way back down the main field, and the doctor's doing a pretty impressive job of patching him back together. But this young rider turned professional for Argos Shimano originally back in 2013, and that was after he won the Tour de l'Avenir in 2012. The Tour de l'Avenir is a race which is regarded as called the race of the future, and it's always regarded as an indicator to riders who can ride well in the big races like the Tour of Italy and the Tour de France. But for Warren Barguil, his first taste of the Grand Tours was in the Tour of Spain. Wilson just at the back there, he's a Belgian rider on the French Cofidis squad. But it comes inside of 11 minutes now, and you can see that there really is a fair amount of pressure in this race, and because of the shortness of the stage, 167 kilometres, I think the teammates are quite happy to do the pacemaking. They know that there's a very good chance of pulling the group back down towards the end. And of course for Team Movistar, it's all about Nairo Quintana, and I'm sure he will go out on the attack. Probably halfway up the climb. It's a long climb. It's only categorized, in fact, at around about 15 kilometers, but driving the course this morning, I would say that the climb really is almost a 20-kilometer climb, because it's a long false flat along the valley until we get into the small town of Arret, where the race is actually categorizing the climb up to the finish. The hardest part of the course is between kilometer 6 and 10, where it's an average gradient in excess of 10%. It really is rather a little nasty, especially the day after the rest day as well, because many riders, their bodies react differently. We had the team time trial on Sunday, then the riders had a long transfer, around about an hour and a half plane flight down to Pau, and then the rest day. And very often some riders, their bodies tend to shut down a fraction on the rest day, and they have to make sure that they go out for a 2 to 3 hour pretty hard ride, especially when they know they've got a mountain stage the next day. 111, very special jersey this young rider is wearing, 24 years of age, Mikkel Kwiatkowski, a world champion. So 10 minutes and 40 seconds. Now there's some assistance coming forward. Now another team who've lost a little bit of a chance of a high finish in the overall standings, the team of Thibaut Pinot, have come forward as well. And always seems to be the situation in France, when you get a French team in the breakaway, and there are two French teams in the breakaway, it's very often left up to the French teams to chase them down. Now Thibaut Pinot has said that he's got no chance of riding high in the overall standing this year, so every opportunity that he gets, he will try and get himself a stage victory. And it was a stage very much like today's profile, Phil, that in fact he got himself a win in the Tour of Switzerland, so that's probably why FDJ have come up to the front.
Yeah, for sure. Thibaut has had a torrid first week and he's over 8 minutes behind. Just staying on the valley side at the moment, very nice roads, great area by the way to go cycling, but once you make the turn to the left you start to climb these wonderful mountains here that link France to Spain.
But there's also a very important intermediate sprint point in Troisville just on the horizon that everybody in the main field will start to take a serious amount of attention to. And Mark Cavendish had a little bit of a mechanical problem earlier on, but he slowly dragged himself back in. His teammate, amazing to see the world champion Mikkel Kwiatkowski doing the work of a domestique or team helper.
Well, he must have forgot one because he's come back for them. Look, Wilfred Peters, his director inside.
Well, it could be that he got the wrong order, Phil. He got the order for the early part of the stage, and now he's gone back for some cold water because it's a pretty warm day down there in the valleys, 27 degrees Celsius. A little bit cooler at the top of the climb here, though.
Most important to keep the fluid topped up today. It is a very hot day, and of course the mountains are coming. 10:18 the gap. This is a really quick tempo now. The two riders up front are not being forgotten, that's for sure. Thibaut Pinot's team are now showing that they are willing to help in the chase here. That's good news for Sky, good news for Movistar.
Just sitting further back. Sorry, Phil, I just noticed this. Quite amazing. Everybody is taking this stage, this first stage in the mountains, very seriously, because you've also got, once you look back behind Team Sky, you've got the fluorescent yellow jerseys of Tinkoff Saxo, of Alberto Contador, and Contador has sent out lots of wishes himself to Ivan Basso, who sadly over the rest day discovered that he's got a testicular cancer, and he's left the race to go back and join his family, and we wish him all the best in his recovery. But I have a feeling that the kind of personality that Alberto Contador's got, he will try and ride, and that will inspire him to ride for Ivan Basso.
He said the Tour is for Ivan now. Well, we'll see. Today's a big test case. We'll see how well that Alberto is riding today on the climbs.
On the front, Kenneth Van Bilsen. He's been in the breakaway before, and he won a small race in the early part of this year. and now he's enjoying his first participation in the Tour de France with an experienced rider, because Peric Federigo in the black and green jersey of Britannia there, he always seems to know exactly when to find the right day to get into the move.
Nice little view of the Chateau de Morléon here.
Yes, a beautiful chateau in Morléon, 11th century the castle originally, and it's in fact situated on a rather interesting archaeological site. The village here sprang up nearby, and the present day's upper town is not too far away, but it was dominated by the English during the conquest of the region in the 15th century. It was then taken back by Gaston of Foix, and Foix also, who we go not too far away in a couple of days' time, has a magnificent castle perched right on the top of the hill, looking down on the valley below. The peloton, well, I think Movistar will be very keen now to get some assistance from FDJ, Française des Jeux. Their man Thibaut Pinot lost a bit of time. He had a lot of bad luck, I think, in the first part of this race. The first week of the race sees Thibaut Pinot, who finished 3rd overall in the Tour de France last year, down in 29th place, more than 8 minutes back. He's just got to forget, I think, now about any chances of winning the Tour de France this year, but what he wants to do is get himself a little bit of glory and quite possibly get himself a stage finish.
Well, they're closing in all of the time on that sprint finish. There's 15 points for the 3rd place, and that's best of the sprinters here at the front of the race.
39 kilometres to go for the leaders. The sprint point is 43 kilometres to go, so they're probably about 3 or 4 kilometres to get to the sprint point for these riders. And then there you can see the green jersey. He's up into 5th position, and that is Peter Sagan. Behind him, it's Andre Greipel. Behind him, it's Mark Cavendish. So they're taking this, Phil, very, very seriously.
Degenkolb's up here, second wheel, I think, at the moment. And yes, Greipel and Cavendish, the 3 big sprinters. That's interesting. Cavendish is in front of his lead-out man, Renshaw, at the moment. Degenkolb is just in front of Greipel. So the 4 sprinters who are going to contest the 15-pointer are all ready to be launched. 38.9 for the leaders. Now, the team management has said that this rider here needed at least 8 minutes at the foot of the climb, and the gap has gone inside that figure. So we expect them to continue to concentrate on those two after we get this sprint out the way. 3rd man in black here is John Degenkolb, then the green is Sagan, the red is Greipel, the next one behind, and Brian Coquard is the rider in green, coming up on the shoulder of Mark Cavendish, who won't like being boxed in at this stage. And the leaders have all pulled away. They've given this one to the sprinters. A nice royal sprint. Now Sagan is 3rd wheel, Greipel is 4th, Cavendish is 5th. Coquard got blown out of that one and sent back to the back. Good lead out, 200 metres to go, still quite a long way. As they come round now, Greipel is going to make his dig on the right now. Sagan's gone after him here. Degenkolb on the left of our picture, but Greipel really is sprinting exceptionally well. He's got the 15 points, Paul. Sagan was right up behind him, so I think he's close, but he hasn't got the green jersey back.
Yeah, but just look at the power when he opens up the sprint. Cavendish there, quite happy to stay in his slipstream. Sagan in the green jersey.
If Sagan doesn't finish 2nd, he's lost green. He's lost green, he's only 4th.
And that's why the other rider from Lotto was coming up there, Phil, to try and snag a few points as well.
Interesting, it was Cavendish behind there, so that's a good result for Andre Greipel. He will now be pulling back on the green jersey tonight.
Big smile on the face of Mark Cavendish. Although they take this very seriously, the intermediate sprint points, they do have a giggle about it afterwards. They're very much, Phil, these guys, like rugby players, they'll fight it out on the field, but once it's all over, they don't mind having a good laugh.
Well, the thing is that this is their race done now, because the green jerseys for the sprinters, it was introduced into the Tour in 1953 because the sprinters were complaining they had no reason to race to Paris because they can't climb mountains, so they gave them their own competition. Now their job is to just help their team leaders and then make sure they finish inside the time limit on these mountain days. And Mr. Consistency wins this race, and that's why Cavendish is nibbling away. You never know what happens, but there we are. Greipel has got 3rd place and 15 points. And then we've got Mark Cavendish, Degenkolb, Sagan only 7th, so he has lost his green jersey for the moment at least. It's gone back to Andre Greipel.
Well, there's a Just inside of 6,000 feet in altitude. Just around the corner we'll see the summit of the Côte de Montory. And as I said earlier, Van Bilsen has scored maximum points in this competition since the start. He was first over the Côte de Bourgabert and the Côte de Villesguir, and those were after 66 and 90 kilometers. I don't see there being much of a chance here. Start to see the Basque flags over on the left-hand side now as we head into the heart of the Pays Basque, or the Basque country. Very popular cycling region as well in France and Spain. We're not far from the Spanish border, as we see Van Bilsen getting himself maximum points over the top of this climb again. The maximum advantage these riders got was just inside of a quarter of an hour, which corresponds to around about a 10-kilometer distance between the leading group of two and the main field. It's now down to 6 minutes, as these two riders are now 12 kilometers away from the start of the final climb of the day.
Well, here we are in Arrête. We might see a sign that says we're 23 kilometers away. We may just have missed it up to the climb itself. It's a ski station normally, of course, and this is the base town, if you like, where you're not quite at the altitude of the summit, which is over 1,700 meters to the top.
Well, this town, in fact, was really struck by devastation in 1967 when 80% of the town was destroyed by an earthquake, which registered 7 on the Richter scale.
It was absolutely in the epicenter, wasn't it?
It was right on the middle there, and they've had to rebuild that. The local church was destroyed, and in fact indicated the time of the seismic event, which was 11:10 in the evening. The shockwaves were felt as far away as Pau and Tarbes. It's at a point like this, Phil, when you're looking at 22 kilometers to go, you know it's pretty much all uphill to the finish when you start to say to yourself, I wonder what I did this for.
Yeah, these boys know with a lead of 4:13 and only 22 kilometers to go on a normal day, they'd win the day, but not today.
There's some fabulous art on the way up towards the finish as well. There's some great decorations being done by Arrête as they welcome the Tour de France into this region. A region this climb is not very often visited. The race has actually been down here before, and it was way back in
2007.
Yes, 2007 they went down this climb, and the winner over the top, by the way, on that occasion was Maurizio Soler, who won the King of the Mountains that year, and then sadly a couple of years after that had a very, very nasty crash in the Tour of Switzerland, which actually ended his career.
Yeah, that was really sad. A great climb from Colombia. He rode for a British licensed team, but in fact it was all formed in South Africa. 4 minutes 7 seconds at the moment as we continue on very good roads. They've actually resurfaced the climb too, so that'll be the legacy of the Tour de France visiting the finish climb here today, because they've got a lovely road for the future.
Yeah, it's a good point you raised there, Phil, because very often the difficulty of the Pyrenees is because of the very rough pavement that the riders normally go over. But as we actually get to the start of the climb proper, it is a very good, smooth tarmac surface. On the left-hand side, the lime green there, Cannondale Garmin looking after Talansky. Also moving up a little bit to the front, we've got the riders here coming forward from IAM Cycling. The gap's really starting to plunge a bit for these guys.
Feeling pretty stiff actually. Quite a few riders are. They won't be too happy today with the climb. As always, there's an elimination time based on the winner's time of the day, but they should be all okay today. Just looking down there, everybody tempo riding. Some of the riders complaining about this. They're calling it the Tour de France a drag race, particularly the riders from Holland, because they say the big teams block the road at the front and all we do is pedal fast and we can't attack from the back and we can't get out the back.
Well, these teams have adopted this position. It's been, you're right, it's been very much like that. We talked about the Fantastic Four, but we've got to include the American TJ Van Garderen now, who is riding, I think, an exceptionally good Tour de France. He's feeling confident, and I spoke to his team manager, or one of the team managers this morning, Alan Piper, who said he didn't expect too much from TJ Van Garderen over the next couple of days. He's going to start to really analyse his options once we get into the Alps. There's Chris Froome in the yellow jersey, always got his teammates up alongside him. There's Peter Kenyuk in the red, white and blue, British national champion, second year in a row from the Isle of Man.
The FDJ boys are still near the front. They put a couple of riders into a puller earlier on. Now, they've taken advice from Thibaut Pinot. He's had bronchitis. He's number 21, if you catch a glimpse there. He's just on the right. If he said his bronchitis is easing, and his hurt or injured knee hasn't been quite so painful. So I think he's indicated to the team, don't be surprised, Paul, if we see him put an attack in when this climb starts.
And then the interesting thing will be, Phil, to see how the other overall contenders actually respond to that attack, because he's lost so much time now.
They don't 8+ minutes.
They don't need to respond to his attack, so he might be allowed a little bit of freedom, which he wouldn't have had if he'd been as close as a couple of minutes down overall. So, of course, obviously inspired by the fact that, as they say in French, it's le 14 juillet, the 14th of July, Bastille Day. It's a big day for the French.
Who was the last Frenchman to win on Juillet 14, Paul?
I'll have a guess that it was David Moncoutier back in Digne-les-Bains in 2005.
You've been reading my notes, I hate that. They're 3:17 now, 17.9 kilometres to go for the leaders. They've just gone under 20 kilometres, so 3:17 represents 2.2 kilometres on the road. It'll represent a lot more very soon as we start to climb. And officially we should see the sign saying the King of the Mountains at 15.3, so just over 2 kilometres to the official start of the climb. The race for the polka dot jersey and the yellow jersey, both could change by the winner today, you never know.
Well, Daniel, for the autobus here in this part of the stage, just a question for him is to survive.
There we go, they've just passed the 15.3 kilometres to go. We've seen already a number of riders dropped, including Mark Cavendish, but now we want to see who's going to launch the first attack.
Yes, it's all a question now of putting the cards onto the table, as we just noticed one or two riders, Ian Stannard slipping backwards as he goes past 15.3 kilometres to go, but the pressure is really being applied at the front, as we haven't yet got to the steepest part of this climb, and already chunks of riders are being left behind.
This is the thing, Paul, and this is what people were saying. If they hit this race at full speed, and they've done just that, it could cause more damage than the Col de Tourmalet today, because it's right to the finishing line now, and there's so few seconds amongst the leaders. They're going to test each other here for sure. Yeah,
Daniel Tekla-Heimerot in that white jersey with the red polka dots, the leader of the King of the Mountains at the start of the day. Well, he's been left behind, as too is Andre Greipel. We're looking at here, the big sprinter, who today, Phil, will climb onto the podium as the new leader in the points competition.
So now the pressure is going on. It is Movistar. Remember, Chris Froome started the day in yellow, 12 seconds ahead of Van Garderen, 1:03 ahead of Contador, just on 2 minutes for Quintana, and 2:22 to last year's winner, Nibali. Those are the time gaps after nearly 10 days of racing. Now watching, and this is the end of Van Bilsen. He was the last rider, the only rider to catch up with the leader, and he sent him back again.
Well, Federico has felt that his compatriot in the breakaway here is struggling a fraction. Van Bilsen will very quickly get picked up by the main field. As we said earlier, Phil, Peric Federico here, he's a very experienced rider. He's won 4 stages of the Tour de France, but I don't think he's going to resist this, because the big guns are ready to fire their first salvo.
Peter Sagan, he's lost that green jersey. He'll probably lose white as well now, because he's dropping off the competition here, and the next logical man in white would be Nairo Quintana. Look at this now, rider after rider just dropping off the back. Rowan Dennis going there, the winner of the first day of this race in Utrecht.
You know, it's pretty horrible when you're in a situation like this, Phil. I just noticed rider Heyerdahl slipping backwards there. That's a bit of a surprise for Cannondale Garmin. But when you hit the climb like this, and you know you've got to come out and do it again tomorrow and the next day, it's not all that good for the morale when you're a non-climber. And this is a bit of a surprise too, because this is Rui Costa,
champion of Portugal. Hey, Jens Voigt, they've hit this hill so fast. The riders have just gone off the back, one after another.
Well, I guess there's a large part of the peloton. They know they cannot win today, but they got another 11 days to go after tonight. So if you can't win, if your job is done on the flats, there's no reason to suffer and go fast up that climb. They calculate the time limit and they just go as fast as they need to stay within the time limit and save as much energy as they can for the next hard days to come. But of course, the guys in front, they're gonna battle it out. They have the lead out men to help them into the climb, and you can see the pace is really fast in the peloton.
The thing is, Jensi, you can see a Movistar really laying it on the line. Now, my gut feeling is if Quintana wants to put himself back into contention, he's got to go quite a long way from the finish, probably on the 10% gradient part, which comes up at about 5 or 6 kilometers to go.
And don't forget, he has Alejandro Valverde, like a multiple Tour de France stage winner, as his like helper. Imagine the situation in any other team. Alejandro Valverde would be the total leader, and here he's just the domestique for Quintana. So they're in a really good, strong position here, and I hope we're gonna see some really good action soon.
Well, we've seen some really good riders drop away while you've been talking, Jens. The world champion's gone, Kwiatkowski. The champion of Norway, Edvald Boasson-Hagen, he's been dropped. He's been riding well. We get back to the front of the race, some serious faces here, and it's Movistar driving the pace with Sky just watching and I suggest waiting.
Yeah, well, that's what they've got to do. When I spoke to Sean Yates this morning, the team manager of Alberto Contador, he said to me, Team Sky don't have anything to do today. They don't have to prove anything, but Alberto Contador needs to go out and get himself a little bit of time, but they expected the big attacks today would come from Team Movistar.
Well, as they continue now, riders going off one by one. This is Anthony Delaplace of the Britannia team. There's not a very big peloton left though. We're doing our best to work our way through the debris to get back onto the tail of this peloton with our camera.
Well, just looking here, this is the race referee. They're just trying to make sure that the cameras and the photographers get out of the way. This is the rider who was in the breakaway, Van Bilsen in the red. He's been caught. You know, just looking there, the 4th place rider in the white jersey, don't get caught out, by the way, because Nairo Quintana is in 2nd place in the best young rider competition, and he wears the white jersey. He will be thinking of doing some serious damage on this climb later on.
Just looking at the tail here, we've lost some big names in the Tour de France already, like the world champion Kwiatkowski. As we look here, the riders dropping off, and all the pressure at the front is by Team Movistar, but Sky are right up behind them, watching and waiting.
Bit of a shock here to see the young Dutchman Wilco Kelderman going backwards as well. Just looking here, and it was interesting to hear what Jens Voigt had to say, Phil. When you think about Movistar, how hard these guys are working, they have so much confidence in their climber Nairo Quintana, but I wonder how Nairo Quintana must feel to have a guy with the reputation of Alejandro Valverde working for him, pacing him at this stage.
And who seems to have come to this race with a great pair of legs, having just won the Championship of Spain. Only one rider left. Moments ago we did see Kenneth Van Bilsen passed by the peloton, and this is trouble here, Paul, because this is Romain Bardet, number 12, and he's slipping it back now with Peter Kenyuk just ahead. Kenyuk was riding very strongly at the front, but it looks as though somebody just knocked on the door.
Well, let's not forget Bardet had a little nasty crash in the early week of this race, and he's been put under pressure. It's always strange, Phil. I've always said this: when you come out of the starting blocks the day after the rest day, the body reacts sometimes in a very, very strange way, and I think that's exactly what's happening here to Romain Bardet. He'll have to count on one leader now. That, of course, will be Jean-Christophe Perrault, who should be well ensconced with the front end of the peloton.
By the end of this day, could be the only Frenchman in any form of contention. 2nd overall last year. And now I'm just seeing if also in the lime green. Yes, here is Andrew Talansky, also been dropped here, although his team got to the front early. I thought he might have been feeling good, but this is an incessant pace being forced out by Movistar. Dan Martin as well.
Well, that's a bit of a shock, because we noticed Cannondale Garmin came to the front. They were on the right-hand side. They were setting quite an infernal pace to stay at the front end of the main, Phil. And for me, Phil, they're 2 big chances. Well, they've popped.
Yeah, I can't understand that, quite honestly, because they seem to have got the plan in order, but it wasn't to work at all. This is the leader, Federico, 4 times a stage winner. He's in his favourite area. He's won 3 times in the area of the Pyrenees, not on top of hills though, and he's now trying to do that today. But at 25 seconds, he's going to see Only a few riders reaching him, I must say.
Well, Phil, the only way he could have won the stage on a day like this was if there'd been a little bit of a surrendering in the main field behind, but everybody realises how important today is. Thomas Voeckler is also in difficulty, number 129, and in the past he's enjoyed his rides through the Pyrenees, but certainly not on day one of 3.
He also looked pretty useful at the start of the climb. He came right to the sharp end of the peloton. I thought, watch out for little Tommy Voeckler today, but he has also cracked under the pressure. Now, what do you think, Jens, about the tactics of Movistar here? They seem to be playing the cards exactly as they planned.
They definitely do play their cards, but I just noticed it's a little less than 12 kilometers, like 7 miles. And they have one rider left to ride tempo, and then it's up to the 2 leaders already. It's up to Quintana and Valverde.
Now,
so how long can one rider pull that tempo or ride that hard tempo on a climb?
Jensi, Thibaut Pinot, 21, he's been left behind as well, and that's why FDJ were doing all of their pacemaking before now. This is an indication of how tough today is, and I'm just wondering now if that may not be the right move by Movistar, because we're talking about Valverde. Yeah, he's a great character, but what this done has seen Movistar as well get reduced in numbers, while there's a lot of riders still there from Team Sky. Maybe they've gone too hard on the first day.
Well, the Fabulous Five, as we're calling them, are still in this very compact group here. TJ Van Garderen, Chris Froome, Quintana, the 3 principal riders, and Nibali is still there as well. They're all still in this group, and Contador, of course. Now, there's got to be an acceleration at some point, but they're watching everybody. And Christophe, where is he?
This is Perrault.
Perrault,
JC
Perrault, yeah. Where's he? He's coming out. There's no Frenchman left.
Well, Phil, this is a question, this is really boom, boom, and out go the lights for the French hopes in the Tour de France this year, because this is the man who finished in 2nd place overall last year. We've seen Thibaut Pinot, who finished 3rd last year. They've disappeared from the nucleus of the top men in the Tour de France on the first climb of the Pyrenees.
Well, the fireworks on Bastille Day are supposed to come at midnight, but it looks like they've come in the afternoon in the Tour de France for the French here. They're all losing contact. This is Robert Hessing, who's trying to take advantage of the tactics here. Hessing is accelerating. Now that might cause a reaction eventually from the field. Hessing overall is over 2:52 behind in 15th place. He's looking to improve now.
Well, he's got a chance, Phil, because of that loss of time, almost 3 minutes down in the overall standings. They don't need to respond to his attack immediately. We're now down to just a few riders left from Movistar. There in the white jersey, Nairo Quintana, his face does not show any expression at all. He is one of the greatest climbers in the world. Robert Hessing has taken the advantage of having lost some time to say, right, I'm going to fly the flag for Holland today. It might be red, white and blue, but it's not the flag that France was expecting to see fly in the Pyrenees.
Well, this is the thing, Paul, with Hessing. As I don't know if we missed it, we just saw him go past, but they caught poor old Federico there. Hessing was first past him. He's gone straight through the group. But this is Robert Hessing here, and this is a sort of move that could be rather interesting, because they're not going to react yet to him.
Sorry, there was Federico just going through the shot there very, very quickly, Phil. When you go backwards on a stage like this, you go backwards very, very quickly. We will talk about him. He's not one of the anonymous riders in the Tour de France this year, but no, goodbye, thank you, merci beaucoup, vive la France.
We'll have the red number on tomorrow as the day's most aggressive rider, so he hasn't gone empty-handed here. Geraint Thomas sitting up behind Quintana in that white jersey, remember. It's not his at the start of the day, it's owned by Peter Sagan, but it might well be his tonight. Janse van Rensburg, the champion of South Africa there, just dropping off the back of this group
Phil,
here. He's had a good ride to stay this long.
Look at the number of riders who are left in that group. That's pretty impressive. That was Matthias Frank as well, number 181.
Now a little bit of a push on here. Now this, if they start doing this, Movistar might start to lift the pace here. They're 12 seconds behind Robert Hessing at the moment. He was finished 5th overall in the Amgen Tour of California this year and stayed on.
Nibali's suffering. Nibali's going out of the back.
Nibali's cracked. Nibali has gone. This is the back of the race here. Last year's winner is in trouble. Now, if they start to hear this, remember that Chris Froome, when he came up the Mur de Bretagne, didn't realise they had Nibali in trouble, but he will now. So as Nibali cracks, so too does Thibaut Pinot.
Phil, my sleeper for the day, Rigoberto Urán, is also in difficulty on this slopes of this very, very difficult climb.
Well, this relentless tempo by Team Movistar, with Sky just following. They haven't played any cards yet. waiting to see. Now this is interesting. Vincenzo Nibali here up against the best climbers. He's not coming out best.
Bauke Mollema as well there in the black and white jersey of Trek Factory Racing. Some big names are slipping away from the yellow jersey group. Right now, I'd have to say, Phil, that Chris Froome looks to be in very, very good situation. He's still got Nicholas Roach up alongside him, but this man, this is a guy who's had so many ups and downs throughout the whole of his career. He had a nasty accident a couple of years ago where he broke his leg, had to fight back into the sport. His father passed away, and it was a very difficult moment for him to get himself back into the sport. And then at the start, well, last year he had that problem with his heart, and now he is at the front in the Tour de France.
21 seconds against 21 riders in this chase group here. There's still some surprising names, including the youngest rider in the race is still here at the moment for MTN, Quebecer. At 10 kilometers to go, it looks like Hessing has 23 seconds.
Well, it just goes to show how quickly things can turn around. Nibali now, Phil, all he can do is stay up alongside his teammates. Now it's Geraint Thomas on the front. Richie Porte
is here as well.
Valverde's making a move here, Phil.
Valverde, a strong man, he's won in this area before and he's accelerating, and now that's going to put them all on the defensive. As I also see the Argentinian rider in there, Eduardo Sepulveda, and he's never ridden the Tour before, and he's in this select group.
Well, when we talked to his team, Bretagne Session with him on before the start of the Tour de France, they had high hopes for this rider. He's in the black and green jersey, and he's hoping to get himself inside, first of all, the top 15, and maybe even the top 10. But the move by Alejandro Valverde, Phil, this puts a lot of pressure onto Team Sky, and that's the advantage that Movistar have.
Well, that was a brutal acceleration, but they're beginning to claw the way back. Rafael Valls is on the right. He's been passed back into this group. It's up to the incredible bike rider, Geraint Thomas, the Commonwealth Games road race champion, to repair the damage again. Van Garderen is number 61. 121 here is Pierre Rolland, who seems to have found himself again here.
Well, you have to wonder about Geraint Thomas, Phil. If he dedicated himself to just riding grand stage races like this one, how good a professional bike rider he would be. Valverde is attacking here, I think, to put a little bit of pressure onto the shoulders of Team Sky to try and isolate them, to try and isolate Chris Froome, because by Valverde attacking, it's forcing Geraint Thomas and then Richie Porte to chase down after him. Then all of a sudden, towards the end of this race, it'll end up being Froome against Quintana.
Now there's the face of Valverde, and a little shy look there from Geraint Thomas, say, hey man, don't do that again, we're back. And he's brought Froome back into the thick of it. The man on Froome, the yellow jersey's back wheel, is TJ Van Garderen. Behind him is Nairo Quintana. We're expecting him to attack. And what about the Adams, one of the Adams twins here at the back of the race, because this is Adam Yates twins rather, Adam Yates at the back, as that's a great piece of climbing by Yates.
Oh, it's a brilliant piece of climbing by the youngster there, Phil, who sits on the back here. He's probably looking up here and saying, wow, look at all these guys I am with. All he's got to realise, though, Phil, that he's in a super position to maybe attack a little bit later on if he's got himself great legs, because they will not respond to an attack by Adam Yates a little bit later on. But look at all these numbers. We're looking all the 51s.
Now Quintana stalking the shoulder there of TJ Van Garderen. Valverde's doing an incredible job of loosening up this breakaway just in favour of Quintana. Terrific bike riding. I think he's come to this Tour on great form.
He has, but I don't think he's doing this for himself. I think Valverde is doing this to put pressure onto Sky. He says, come on boys, you want to win the race? He is attacking. He keeps forcing them to chase him down. 12. So is Adam Yates.
Adam Yates also gone as we go up to 6.8 kilometres left to ride. This has become the creme de la creme. There's one or two surprises in there.
Oh, Contador's going.
What's he doing? He's lost the wheel there, and he's beginning to lose ground rapidly. Now, if Alberto Contador, if this is realised, he's really struggling to hang on here. We just lost Adam Yates. Now Contador is losing ground.
So too has Valverde gone. Now it's down to Richie Porte. Looks over his shoulder. He's going to try and do the damage now. Locked on the wheel of Chris Froome is Nairo Quintana, and just hanging in there is TJ Van Garderen.
Yes, and Valverde now has done his bit. He's gone. Pierre Rolland has gone. The French Hope has gone as well. 6.6 kilometres, and it's Richie Porte, the wingman, driving racing again for Froome.
Yeah, Phil, can I just remind you, 6.5 kilometres left to go. There's still 20 minutes of climbing before these guys get themselves up towards the finish line. Richie Porte now has got the form that helped Bradley Wiggins win the Tour de France, that helped Chris Froome win the Tour de France in the past. Now it's down to just 3 men. Froome, look at that amazing pedalling cadence. He can spin those pedal rounds so very, very quickly. Speeds are approaching 100 revolutions a minute, but sitting locked into his wheel there is the man in the white jersey from Boyacá in Colombia, Nairo Quintana. Looks now as if it's a little bit of a change reversal. There is Hessink, he's alongside. Oh, and this is Froome.
Well, Froome has accelerated, but the little man from Colombia has realised it. Can he chase him down? Chris Froome is really putting the hammer down here now to test everybody in the Tour. And it looks as though only Quintana, for the moment, is remotely going to control Froome.
Well, Phil, we've seen this so many times from Team Sky before, attack on the first big mountain stage, and that's exactly what Chris Froome wants to do now. He's not comfortable with the gaps he's got already. He wants to put the hammer down and get as big a gap over everybody on day one in the mountains. I keep looking round the side of the camera screen there, Phil, to see if I can spot Quintana. Here he is.
It's a long gap already. The Basque flags are on the corners. He shoots around. It steepens up there. Froome looks over his shoulder to see where he is. He's only going to see one man in a white jersey.
But don't forget what Chris Froome did the first time he came up against Nairo Quintana 2 years ago. He overestimated his own ability, and Quintana came back again.
I'll tell you what, that's a big move by Chris Froome, and the acceleration that using low gears. And in fact, Richie Porte had to move out the way. He'd had enough, but he's being chased now, and if anything, he might be nailing him back a little bit.
Well, Quintana is a fabulous climber, the winner last year of the Giro d'Italia.
This is Van Garderen here. So Van Garderen is dropped now. There's 2 prominent dominating men in the Tour de France. This one's beaten. Now, for how long, though? Contador, I suspected all week he wasn't happy. He might be tired from his victory in the Tour of Italy.
Well, Phil, it's so very difficult at this level of the sport nowadays to be able to ride the Tour of Italy to win and then come back and try and win the Tour de France to win. That's why Chris Froome did not ride the Tour of Italy this year. He's concentrated specifically on being ready for the month of July.
Concentrating, puffing, blowing, living what he can do best, counting his revs, looking at his power output, and just getting on with his own job. He's not racing anybody, he's racing himself right now, Chris Froome.
Well, Quintana here still looks pretty concentrated there, Phil. You just saw him give the nod to the spectator at the side of the road. He wanted cold water poured over himself just to wake himself up a little bit. The heat sometimes tends to put you a little bit to sleep, and so that cold water on the back of the neck is a bit of a shock.
Well, Robert, the gaps are terrible now, Paul. 2:32 from the yellow to Nibali, 1:11 to Contador, and only Van Garderen almost heading out to him. And only Quintana has control of Chris Froome.
Well, for Vincenzo Nibali in second position there with the Italian flag around his waist, it's a question of survival. He's got some good company as well, Rigoberto Urán. But you see, TJ Van Garderen, Phil, he keeps recovering. He hasn't got the change in speed like a climber as Robert Hessink, but once he gets his diesel engine going, he can crawl his way back. But this man is amazing.
Watch the crowds, they spot the yellow jersey climbing up here in the manner of the great Tour winners, winning the big stages that count, looking for 5 kilometres to go, and by tonight Chris Froome will be over a minute ahead of the second man on the race. After today, big time. 3 kilometres to go. This is the next group on the road with Geraint Thomas in it and Pierre Rolland at the back, Valverde.
Well, Alejandro Valverde, he won't give TJ Van Garderen any assistance at all. For Pierre Rolland, well, it's a question of he tried this afternoon.
2 kilometres to go for Chris Froome now. It gets a little bit easier and then he'll kick again. You'll see where he's heading to very shortly. Every pedal rev is gaining time. Is he putting enough on the table to say he can win the Tour de France now? It's still a week and a half from Paris. this popular Colombian. They're trying to drive him on here. The waters part.
Finally, a little bit of respite from the noise of Nairo Quintana, but no respite from the effort. He's still got to keep racing. He's still got to keep the pressure on to try and limit his losses as he comes over the final kilometre or so.
Well, everybody individually has feared Froome. Now we know why. He's dictating the Tour de France to them today, but you know, the Tour is a strange animal, and bodies change over the next week and a half in the mountains. It's a very mountainous Tour from now on. Great today, maybe not so great tomorrow, and Quintana is rather hoping that might be the case.
Well, Richie Porte is still recovering according to Race Radio. It's very difficult once you get into the mountains and the race is split up so dramatically to find out where everybody is. But who would ever have thought that a kid that grew up in Nairobi, in Kikuyu, and started riding about with a bike with David Kinja would be dominating the Tour de France quite like this in the Pyrenees?
Well, here is Richie Porte here as he fights for another high position for himself in the Tour de France now. He's got Quintana in his gun sights, and he's got time to make this a Sky 1-2 at the summit of the first big challenge of this year's Tour. Closing in, Richie Porte, the Tasmanian rider. There's the 1 kilometre kite, and Chris Froome goes under it with a comfortable lead.
And still, Phil, it's the same cadence, the high pedalling cadence that Chris Froome has developed over the last few years. People have wondered about it. It's a very strange pedalling style, maybe not the most beautiful style in the world when it comes to the aficionados who like to see a smooth pedalling action, but I tell you what, it's extremely efficient for Chris Froome.
And what about Porte here? He's being drawn to Quintana like a magnet. He's just going to try and nip him on the line. Meanwhile, Chris Froome still in all sorts of pain that he wants to feel, because he knows with every pedal rev he adds another second to his overall lead in the Tour de France. He's looking for his 5th ever stage win, of course. He's won the Tour as well. And it looks to me as though Geraint Thomas is chasing anything from this next group.
Yes, that acceleration was Pierre Rolland. The fact of the matter is that this group had slowed down a fraction because Tony Galopin had recovered.
Well, our camera foreshortens the length, but I don't know how far we'd say that was, but he's very close, a kilometre to go, to catching up with Quintana. Froome, meanwhile, is ready to salute the crowd here. He's won on La Planche des Belles Filles in Trois Domaines, Mont Ventoux. He won the time trial at Chorges in the past. It's another mountaintop victory for this incredible bike rider. And now, who is to beat him in this year's Tour de France? It must be an incredible feeling at 500 metres. And the crowd barriered safely back to a place where we've never been before. And look at this too. Quintana was supposed to win today for his team. He might not finish second.
Well, I wonder whether or not Richie Porte, number 35 there, signed his contract, because I think he'll be increasing his value with a ride like this today.
Well, it could be an incredible demonstration by Team Sky here. As he comes around the corner, 300 metres to go. Chris Froome, the winner of the Tour de France in 2013. He celebrates a 4th day in the Maillot Jaune. He also wore it early on for a day. And now he dances all the way to the summit of the La Pierre Saint-Martin. And when we see the time gaps later on, we're going to ask ourselves, is there anybody now can beat him in this year's Tour de France? 100 metres to go. Froome has conquered, literally, the sky's the limit now for him as he comes up this climb of Saint-Martin. The Tour's first ever visit, and it's won by the leader of the Tour de France in yellow. And boy, it's going to be a big lead tonight. No longer will it be just 12 seconds. Now is Richie Porte going to jump Nairo Quintana?
Well,
can he jump Nairo Quintana?
The question is if he wants to jump him or not, but maybe for a psychological blow to Nairo Quintana, who everybody was expecting to be the winner at the top of this climb here today. Well, Nairo Quintana now, number 51, has been put on the back foot, and Richie Porte goes.
Here he goes. There's a 6-second bonus for second, a 4-second for third. They're not going to give him anything, the Sky team. They've even taken a 2-second bonus off him there, as Richie Porte will be delighted with this. Now, Richie has said he is leaving Team Sky at the end of the year. He won't say to whom, but it's to Team BMC, the USA squad, because he wants to win for himself. Well, today he's finishing second to his team leader, Chris Froome.
Well, funnily enough there, Phil, as this man crosses the line in second position, he will be in second position at the end of the day in the King of the Mountains competition, so he will more than likely be the wearer of that tomorrow, because Froome has certainly got yellow.
The white jersey, yes, it could now stay for sure on the shoulders of Quintana, as Robert Gessing has survived a great day for him. It really has. He took the race to them. It didn't quite work out, but he's hung on well here.
Well, he certainly has. A great performance by Robert Gessing, and look at how much effort he's putting in just to getting up to the line. He's going to climb up in the standings at the end of today.
You'll see this is a brilliant day in the Tour de France. Gessing, that's the fourth man over the line. Now here comes the group of Valverde, who tried to soften up the Sky Boys, didn't quite work out. In the distance is TJ Van Garderen. It looks as though Yates is going to have a dig here.
Yeah, but look at Valverde there, and Geraint Thomas just sitting on the wheel of Alejandro Valverde. Valverde's the man who tried to set all of this up in the early part of the day. It kind of backfired on him a fraction.
Fifth place, and I don't think Geraint Thomas even tried to beat Valverde there, just tapped him on the back, said well done. Sky have had an unbelievable day, because I think they'll be in the lead in the team race now.
Brilliant day, just looking round the corner. This is an impressive ride too. This is Tony Galopin coming up to the line. I'm impressed by this young man as well, aware of the yellow jersey. And there is TJ Van Garderen, a little bit further back with the yellow helmet, who started the day in second place overall.
TJ Van Garderen is home. He's been in a real battle today, but he'll live to fight another day. And Contador, he's lost time he did not expect to lose. Big question mark now on Alberto Contador.
Yeah, those legs look like they're buckling a fraction. He's really trying everything just to limit his losses, but when he looks at the clock at the end of today, he's going to see 2 minutes and 50 seconds lost. That is a huge chunk of time for Alberto Contador. And another man who's going to have lost a huge chunk of time at the end of the day, of course, is going to be Vincenzo Nibali, because Nibali has still got to get up here to the line. Rafael Valls comes in there just ahead of Jakob Fuglsang. Oh, this is a nice little move here as well, because that's a good finish there coming for, that was Warren Barguil in second position. And here is the man that everybody thought would be one of the big favourites this year. Well, at the end of the day, I think he's going to have to really think about what is going to happen, because a little bit down the road there's still a long way to get to the finish for Vincenzo Nibali.
Well, I'll tell you what, when they look at all the time gaps and changes on the classification today, it's going to be a very different classification. And this is only the first day in the mountains, and the only real hill was this climb up to the finish. Here comes Vincenzo Nibali, and he's conceded over 4 minutes today when he gets to the finishing line. It's still a little bit of a ride, so it's been a total disaster. Lawrence Ten Dam is with him at the back as well. Two more days in the High Pyrenees, my goodness me. Tomorrow we finish at Cauterets, having crossed the Col d'Aspin. In 2 days' time we finish at the Plateau de Baille. Let's have a look at the result first. Froome at 59 seconds, Quintana 64, Gessing in 4th place, Valverde 5th. Geraint Thomas did well to hold on to 6th place. Adam Yates crosses the line in 7th. Pierre Rolland did a good ride for him today. He's on his way back in 8th. Galopin, the only man to stop Vincenzo Nibali, leading all the way after his lead in Sheffield last year. He's come home in 9th. There's the face of Chris Froome as he comes over the line. It's pain, yes, but it's the good feeling of pain, because he knows he's made so much time over everybody in the Tour de France.
It's not even a question of the victory this afternoon, Phil. It is a question of the time. His teammate Richie Porte, well, he won't be a threat because Richie Porte's lost a huge amount of time. But I think from a morale point of view, that will be a great move there for Richie Porte.
Well, we've not been to this finish line before. We've been in the region here, but we've never come to the finish line at La Pierre Saint-Martin. and what a climb it turned out to be, because the riders hit it so hard, and that played right into the hands of Chris Froome. They started it, he finished it.
Well, there was a little Swahili sign just about 2 or 3 kilometres to go, and it just reminds me, as we look there at Chris Froome, of another Swahili expression which says "Imara como Simba," as strong as a lion.
Look at this, Paul, the overall standings. Van Garden is still second, but at 2 minutes 52, not 12 seconds. Quintana is in third place now, and he will keep the white jersey. Valverde is in fourth place. Thomas is up to fifth. Contador is in sixth place. He actually drops 1 place.
Yeah, there's some massive time gaps at the end of today's stage, and we've still got 2 more Pyrenean stages to go. There is Ryder Hagedal, former winner of the Giro d'Italia, coming up for Cannondale-Garmin. And there is Romain Bardet, the second place rider from AG2R. He hasn't had a great day.
Welcome to stage 11 of the Tour de France. This is Matthew Keenan with you. After Chris Froome stamped his authority on the race yesterday, today we'll find out a lot about the resolve of the other pre-race favourites. The green jersey, it is a tight tussle between Andre Greipel, who currently leads by 3 points ahead of Peter Sagan. The race for the King of the Mountains classification, the stage win, has given Froome the lead. He's 11 points clear of his teammate Richie Porte. The white jersey for the best young rider, that is with Nairo Quintana. Stage 11 started in Pau, finishing in Cauterets, 188 kilometres, and it is a significant day of climbing. There are 6 categorised climbs, including the Col de Tourmalet, one of the most famous climbs in the race, being scaled today for the 80th time in the history of the Tour. Perfect conditions for the spectators in Pau earlier this afternoon as the race rolled out with the neutral zone just before midday. For some 20 minutes before the flag came in, and then the racing has really been on. Matthew Ladanu from the FDJ squad, one of the local riders in the peloton. Across the first hour of racing, they covered 48.1 kilometres. It was an extraordinary start to the race, and there were some significant attempts at breakaways. And in amongst them, we saw a number of riders from the Cannondale-Garmin squad, including Dan Martin, trying to get into the thick of the action. But at the first major rendezvous of the day, the intermediate sprint, it was Matteo Trentin who took the points ahead of Peter Sagan. So Peter Sagan picking up 17 points at that intermediate sprint. He now moves back into the lead of the race for the green jersey, and he moves to 14 points clear of Andre Greipel. This is the situation of the day, a breakaway group now of 7 with an advantage of 4 minutes and 7 seconds. Serge Pals is the rider who is in the break for MTN Quebecer. A nice result for the Belgian, who finished strongly yesterday, taking 14th position on the stage. 2 riders in the move for FDJ. The sprinter, although he's proven to be more than that, Arnaud Demar, along with Steve Morabito. And Morabito is the best placed overall in that breakaway group. And he is still a long way down at 26 minutes and 37 seconds. Astana looking to save the day somewhat. This is Andrei Grivko, the Ukrainian, who's just slipping off the front end of the main peloton, which under the control of Team Sky and the teammates of Chris Froome, who yesterday put in one of the best performances they've ever delivered in their time in cycling. 3 riders inside the top 6. Froome the winner, Porte in second position, Geraint Thomas in 6th place. Well, that Martin that you see at 3 minutes and 25 seconds, it's not Tony Martin, it is Dan Martin, the Irishman from the Cannondale-Garmin squad, another team that was disappointed with how things unfolded yesterday. Dan Martin, he had a 4th place finish on the stage to the top of the Mur de Huy, a 2nd place finish on the stage to the top of the Mur de Bretagne. He was hoping for a lot more yesterday, but he conceded a significant chunk of time and has slipped to more than 21 minutes behind the yellow jersey.
It was an extremely busy start to the day. There's already been 3 climbs that have been crested. The first one, it was Thomas Voeckler, who won the King of the Mountains classification in 2012, who led over the top ahead of Dan Martin. So the Irishman very active. The second climb, Steve Morabito, who's now in the breakaway for the FDJ team. He led over the second climb. We're looking here at his teammate, Arnaud Démare, in this breakaway group of 7 riders off the front, with a good advantage of 4.5 minutes. Then the third climb of the day, it was Daniel Tecla-Hamanot who collected the points, and that was a Category 3 climb. Steve Morabito, number 27 from FDJ. One team with 2 riders in the front group.
So a few moments ago, there was quite a bit of pacemaking being done by Team Sky. I think Sky just today would like to have a slightly easier ride, because Chris Froome himself admitted this morning legs were a little bit sore, and that's not surprising after the amazing dominant performance he put in yesterday. And nice chance there to see Richie Porte. Lots of congratulations coming alongside for Richie Porte. Porte was second on the stage yesterday, and he's wearing, or should I say borrowing, the lead in the King of the Mountains competition from his own teammate, and that of course is Chris Froome. But it's the first time ever that Richie Porte has worn the King of the Mountains jersey at the Tour de France. It was a very rapid start to the day as well, because after 5 kilometres a 4-man breakaway got clear, and interestingly enough in that breakaway an Astana rider, Louis Vestre. That's what we've done so far in the race as we start here the Col d'Aspin. And just sitting on the back there is Thomas Voeckler of Team Europcar. No stranger at all to breakaways like this. And this is the sort of day when you could lay down the foundations of a victory in the King of the Mountains competition. Voeckler went over the previous climb, a 4th category, in 2nd place. But he knows that if this breakaway can survive over the Col d'Aspin and the Col de Tourmalet, he could be looking down the barrel of a lead in the King of the Mountains competition, a competition which in the past he has. 2 riders from FDJ. Steve Morabito is the rider from Switzerland, who used to be a rider of Team BMC Racing, and he's sitting in that group. He wears number 27.
Looking at the long slopes here, the Col d'Aspin is a 1st category climb. Now it's not a leg breaker, but it is Col de Tourmalet, as it so often is in this part of the Tour de France. We'll come up to the base of the Col de Tourmalet after the descent of the Col d'Aspin. Now, can Dan Martin catch them up and win the day? Well, this is a lovely part of the Col d'Aspin, shaded by these trees. We don't often see trees on a major mountain like this at this height, but here they are. This is Serge Pauwels on the front for MTN Quebec at the moment. Arnaud Démare is in 2nd place, and Démare, of course, is the sort of rider we expect to see in the sprints, not climbing up a mountain.
But I'm not sure if you noticed Serge Pauwels at the front there as well, Phil. He actually has won a King of the Mountains competition in the past, and that was in the Santos Tour Down Under. So there's a couple of riders here who are going to be very inspired by trying to win the point at the top of this mountain. But they're going to have to hope that Dan Martin doesn't come back, because Dan Martin looks like a man on a mission here this afternoon.
Yes, the Tour Down Under, of course, in Australia, and the mountains, they wouldn't count as mountains in this part of the world, that is for sure.
Yes,
just little hills, but hard and hot.
I would just like to add, Phil, that yesterday Serge Pauwels finished 14th on the stage when some of the big names of the sport had disappeared. Guys like Vincenzo Nibali, they cracked. So Serge Pauwels maybe could be the man for the match.
He is, and again, he's another example of the enthusiasm of the MTN Quebec team here as we get back to the peloton in charge by Sky. Here comes Martin to keep the breakaway, a group of 7, replacing the Frenchman Arnaud Démare, and this has been the chase of the Tour for me. Tremendous crossing of the gap, and it's coming exactly where he wanted to reach them before the top of the Aspin.
Just look at the pedalling style, Phil. You can see the energy that he's got. He's riding at a reasonably good cadence on a climb like this. He's keeping his gears nice and low. He's nodding his head a little bit, but those are not the nodding movements of somebody suffering fatigue. It's somebody just trying to keep the pace nice and high. He has bridged, since he started this climb, more than 3 minutes, and that is a very impressive number.
Well done. We wonder why Canadair were working at the front this morning and not getting anybody in the breakaway, but they set it all up and they've took the chance. Dan Martin has climbed up this mountain at just under 11 miles an hour. That's what he's doing right now as he comes up behind the breakaway of 6.
But I think they'll be quite shocked to have seen how quickly he rode across that gap, because these riders will have all been given the information in their radios from the team management, and they will have known that the main field right now sits in excess of 7 minutes behind them. They will have known that Dan Martin was trying to ride across the gap, and I'm sure we'll see some rather strange expressions on the faces of these riders once he comes up. But he doesn't, in my opinion, Phil, he doesn't need to ride past them. He needs to keep with them for a little while, because they've got to go over the top of this climb, the Col d'Aspin, down into the valley and start the next climb, the giant of the Pyrenees, the Tourmalet. So great job of work there done by Dan Martin, a brilliant manoeuvre. He jumped away from the main field as they went along the valley road down into Arrow, because he didn't want the confusion of starting the Col d'Aspin. Here he is, he's made the junction. It's another 7 riders back to the front, because we've lost 1 rider from that original 7-man leading group, and that was the sprinter from FDJ, Arnaud Demar.
No movement yet from the leaders, as the crowd must have come up here pretty early to get this position on the Col d'Aspin. The cars must be parked just on the summit. We'll see the banner very shortly now as we come around this twisting bend here. Move has started, and it's Dan Martin going to try and ride them off. The last man to join them on the climb, bridging a gap of over 3.5 minutes. And they've opened up the gap. The other 2 letting them get on with it at the back here, Morabito and Buchmann. Anybody going to challenge? Vogler has gone after Dan Martin. He's checking out who's left, but I'm thinking he's got too strong a pair of legs today, Dan Martin. We might be seeing him realise part of his ambition today. He's going to go for the King of the Mountains. 10 points on the line for Martin on this first category climb.
8 points for second place for Vogler. Then coming up in third place, Serge Powell. He'll get himself 6 points, but obviously that is in the back of Dan Martin's mind here this afternoon. The next climb on the day, Phil, that will bring a lot more points. 25 points if this breakaway succeeds, and I expect it to succeed over the slopes, of course, of the Col de Tourmalet.
Now he's still got more points on the top of the Tourmalet. If he can win that one, he gets another 25, and that will give him 37 and put him in third place in the King of the Mountains. So he can't catch it today, Port or Froome, but he has closed in, and that might be his thoughts for the day.
Yeah, you can see just a
oops, abandon of Johan van Sommeren. He has struggled with injury.
Well, that is a bit of a shock, really, because Johan van Sommeren is a big integral part of AG2R La Mondiale. It just goes to show how many riders have nursed themselves through these first few days of the Tour de France, the worst week and a half of the Tour de France. And we had seen Johan van Sommeren struggling at the back end of the pack on a number of occasions. That, unfortunately, for the main field, as you look across the valley there, is where they have to go to, while the leading group of riders now are quite comfortably on the descent.
Pretty fast and reasonably short descent here. We're hitting 61 kilometers an hour, just under 40 miles an hour at the moment. As they continue the drop down, everybody likes to see their own way down the mountains. This is a pretty good descent. One of the descenders would really like to come down. There's not too many traps on this descent, is there, down the Aspin?
No, it's a pretty technical descent though, and as you can see, you're just taking a few risks going around the corners. It was Dan Martin. Martin is a very good descender. He's a very good bikehander, which is quite strange because he's had a couple of nasty crashes in his career. I remember a nasty one in the start of the Tour of Italy when it was in Ireland. He crashed in the team time trial, then he crashed inside of the final 300 metres in Liège-Bastogne-Liège, but he was very, very close to getting himself another victory. But everything seems to be going right today because he looks like a man really on form.
Vogler is a very, very good descender, that's for sure, and he's prepared to lead the charge down here.
He's got to try and catch up to Dan Martin, who's taken off for about a 15 or 20 second advantage.
That's Michael in second place. There's Martin. I tell you what, I wonder if they're expecting an attack from Dan Martin down the Aspin, so he gets through in Santa Marie de Campan and getting into the lead straight onto the lower slopes of the... He really is feeling pretty confident today.
Well, he is, but I wouldn't have made the move just yet because there's quite a long way, Phil, along this descent. Then you've got a little bit of a valley road along to the start of the Col de Tourmalet. Yes, I know he's in great form. He's proven that already by the way he rode across the gap. But I think better part of valor would be to wait for a moment for the breakaway group to have the strength of a 7-man group along the valley road, and then if he feels really good, to make his move on the Col de Tourmalet.
Meanwhile, the peloton hardly having a day off, but they're riding very nervously here, watching each other, battling out for that yellow jersey at the Tour. All of the projected favourites totally shocked by the way Chris Froome rode them all off his wheel yesterday. Now they're going to have to rethink their tactics. There's all sorts of rumours that they're all going to gang up on Chris Froome. Ganging up on one man is one thing, but ganging up on the team, Sky, is most certainly another, because this is a very strong team.
Definitely. Andre Greipel, he's going to lose that green jersey competition at the end of today, because he just missed out in the intermediate sprints when we went through the town of Lusac. In fact, Peter Sagan was second at that sprint point. And back with his group, but just a little bit further down the road, well, it looks as if Dan Martin is actually just listening to me, because I think he's decided to back off a fraction. He's in a comfortable situation with a 7.5 minute advantage over the main field, which contains all of the overall contenders. For the moment, they seem to be in recovery mode after what was a very, very difficult stage yesterday for everybody. Made more difficult by the fact that you had that two-man breakaway getting clear early on with an advantage at one stage of close to 15 minutes. And what that forced all the teams who wanted to win the stage to do was to chase extremely hard. So then it was a question of really blowing the race apart once they started that final climb. Just slipping away. This is Talansky. I think he's just dropping back to the team car. Doesn't look like anybody in any stress at all. Quite happy with the fact that a bit of pressure taken off his shoulders at this point by the fact that he's got Dan Martin in the leading breakaway group.
So we saw Peter Sagan going back. I think his job now is to just get some bottles for the boys, because he's a great descender, and many teams do within the last kilometer before a hilltop finish, they just go and get somebody to get bottles, deliver the bottles right on top of the climb, so everybody has a fresh cold water bottle for the descent. That's what most teams do, because everybody throws the bottles away on the uphill and they just refill on water on the last kilometer of the climb.
Well, that may be what he's doing, Jens. I must say they need plenty of fluids today. It is very, very hot at the peloton. Coming up towards the summit, Dan Martin still on his own on the way down. The peloton, the 7:46, is just going to be tickling 8 minutes here. That might be a gap for the day that they will not bridge as they go over the finish, about 7:48. And it was Richie Porte getting some points there in the King of the Mountains. Oh no, he's missed out. Only the first 6 got points today, so he was 8th. So as the peloton go over, they're just keeping an eye on the whereabouts of the real stars of the Tour after yesterday's racing. Chris Froome at the moment enjoying his second day in the Pyrenees in the hot sunshine. Hasn't been challenged since we started today from Pau, but can Dan Martin take the win?
Yeah, well, as you can see, it is extremely warm on the Tour de France today, 33, 34 degrees Celsius, and a lot of the teams had helpers at the top of that climb, and the riders, you can see them just moving over to the side, more concerned with taking on board liquid, cold liquid for the descent, than actually staying in contact with the main field. Back with the leading group now, which is reformed. There's Dan Martin. I think Martin obviously making a sensible decision there, Phil, to wait for the rest of this group, because as I've said, you've got the quick descent of the Col d'Espagne, the first 3 or 4 kilometres, and Arnaud Démare using his ability to catch back to the leading group on the descent. He's a good bike handler, a former French national champion, and he just got tailed off by a fraction over the top of the climb, and obviously took 1 or 2 risks in the first corners to catch back up.
Well, the peloton have now started their descent, stringing out, yes, but flying down this hill at the moment. Gap 7:45. They're still not racing after those leaders. There's nobody in that breakaway who is going to worry the leaders overall. The best placed is Morabito. The best placed, is Serge Pauwels. He's 32 minutes. Sorry, Dan Martin is the best placed, 21 minutes down. The computer decided not to put those in order today, so 21 minutes down for Dan Martin. He's recovering the best part of 8 minutes at the moment.
Well, again, it seems as if you want to get the roads done in your department of France, the best thing to do is to invite the Tour de France into the area, because this looks like a nicely resurfaced road as well as we go through the small little town in the Compiègne region of La Séoube.
Well, they were all workers to form this breakaway today. There was no question of one attack, a gap gained, and off we go. They had to work. It took a long time some 76 kilometres of racing before they finally got the group away. And Dan Martin, as we saw, came up by himself on the Col d'Aspin.
Just to notice that beautiful lake down there, the Payol Lake, which is situated about 1,000 meters in altitude. It's a 10-hectare artificial lake surrounded by a beautiful conifer forest.
I tell you what, Paul, we are very close now to the Pic du Midi, which is a terrific sight here. Now, normally on a day like this, we see it shrouded in mist. I wonder if our helicopter's listening to me, because today it must be visible for miles.
Well, it would be fantastic to see it. In fact, it was built as an observatory in the 19th century, and I still wonder how they managed to get all of the equipment right the way up to the top of that Pic du Midi, because it peaks out at just inside of 2,900 meters above sea level.
Very often the snow line's still with it, but let's hope we pick that one up, because on a day like this it'll be pretty special. The peloton just taking it easy. There's no racing being done here, nobody taking any risks on the twisting descent of the Col d'Aspin. Sensible cornering, beautiful racing conditions, of course. And tomorrow we're in the Pyrenees, a third day, a third uphill finish as we race to the top of the Plateau de Bay.
Well, one rider who's actually just gone in front of these riders as well is Warren Barguil. He really is doing a phenomenal ride. He's up and down in this group a little bit like a yo-yo. He gets dropped, he gets back into his rhythm. Rigoberto Urán, well, he's also now having a similar sort of a day. These riders, Phil, will all hope that they can stay within about a minute of this group, because on the technical descent of the Col de Tourmalet, this group of the yellow jersey of Chris Froome, I don't think will take too many risks on the descent. But anyone left by around about a minute towards the top of the climb can use the technical descent to get themselves back into contact.
Now, Mike has called for his team vehicle here. He's put his hand up as he runs towards the summit. As they're coming up towards the 1 kilometre to go. And they're pushing on past him. There's the team car come through. What do you want? Information, I would think, more than a drink. He's had a time check, he's worked out what's behind, he knows there's 14 riders probably left in that Maillot Jaune group, and they're just settling down, because he's actually taken half a minute out of that group now.
Well, at one stage they got to 4.5 minutes behind him, and I think he's doing a pretty phenomenal job. He must be really, interestingly, investing in a stage victory this afternoon, because if he goes over the top with 5.5 minutes, I'm pretty sure that they won't see him before they get down to the finishing line. This is Matthias Frank, number 181, the leader of IAM Cycling, the Swiss team.
And Laurens ten Dam alongside him doing another great Tour de France here. The man who's setting the pace on this select bunch of 14. Nope. Richie Porte, and if you span around, you see how many Sky riders are still here. The riders in the bunch have noticed this. The team is strong, and always riding near to Chris Froome in the white jersey is Nairo Quintana, just waiting to see if he can, when he can.
Well, Rafael Majka certainly doesn't look like he's struggling at all on the slopes of this climb. He's got a very nice rhythm going in. He's ticking out as if he's just out for a touristic ride through the Pyrenees here this afternoon. But it's having a very good effect. When you look at the names in that group behind him, being led by Richie Porte, Geraint Thomas, Chris Froome, Vincenzo Nibali, Nairo Quintana, he's actually stretched his advantage out by another good few seconds to 5 minutes and 34. He's not really dangerous either, Phil, in the overall standings. He's more than 51 minutes behind Chris Froome in the overall standings, but for him, it's a chance of giving his team a stage victory.
Richie Porte now told to keep the pace steady by a very much concentrating Chris Froome there, who's now riding alongside the other man to have won the Tour in recent years, last year, Nibali. Contador here knows his teammate hopefully is going to win the stage and bring something to the team. Laurens ten Dam just tacked on at the back here. And Barguil is still wrestling with himself now. He's losing a little bit of contact just now.
But Phil, this guy we're looking at, he's 23 years of age. He's got a long future ahead of him, and he's got a lot to learn about the Tour de France.
The Polish flag for a Polish man. Well, a massive crowd on the Col du Tourmalet. He's not far off getting the maximum points here. He started his quest to try and regain the King of the Mountains title he won last year. Always a nice sight, Paul, when you've been climbing for so long. The banner at the top of the high spot of the Tour de France at 6,940 feet. Rafał Majka is on the descent. It's a fast one before the climb to the finish.
Oh, it certainly is, but it's very, very technical in the first part. You can see the flags in the background, the flag of Spain raked, really stretched out there, and the wind is picking up over the top of the climb, but it is a pretty technical descent. So they've got around about 20 kilometers down into the valley, and that's not going to take them very much more than 20 minutes of descending after having gone uphill for close to a 1 hour of ascent. Richie Porte, he really has found his legs over the last 48 hours. He's doing a lot of pacemaking at the front there to look after his teammate. And you know, Geraint Thomas is well up in the overall standings. Geraint Thomas, I think, is amazingly sitting in 5th place overall there. That's a man who could possibly think of a future victory in the Tour de France if he too was given a little bit of freedom.
Meanwhile, our French cameras concentrating on this young man here, beaten and battered from a nasty fall yesterday. Still finished well yesterday, and now having to hang on. Warren Barguil, his whole family following him on the tour now, from grandma through his nieces, through mum and dad, and unfortunately he fell yesterday.
Yes, it was a nasty crash, and I have to say, Phil, for the length of time that he was on the ground, I was not convinced that he was going to get back up. And now it'll be interesting to see just the gap back to the group behind Rafał Majka to Dan Martin.
Second participation in the Tour de France for this man here. He became the first Polish rider to win the King of the Mountains. Now he scored 25 points going over the top of the Col du Tourmalet. Won the Tour of Poland last year. Big win for a Polishman. It's a very tough race, the Tour of Poland, by the way. And now he's going to show us how he descends. He and Peter Sagan saved it for Tinkoff Saxo last year because of the early exit of Alberto Contador. Now he's going to try and do it again. And today, of course, we're going to see Sagan pull back on the green jersey. So the same duo, maybe try to save it for them again. 5:40 the gap at 1 kilometre to go.
Well, just going over the top of the climb, Phil, 4th over the summit was Dan Martin, but more than 2 minutes behind Rafał Majka. Second over the top was Serge Pauwels at 1 minute 48 seconds, but there's a lot of big names in this group behind. And I have to say, Alejandro Valverde is riding up and down that group as if he's a policeman looking after his own teammate there. And the teammate, you know, I think Quintana won't do too much of a move today because tomorrow's stage really is quite horrific when you look at the profile, the Porte de Balès and then down towards the Plateau de Bay.
Dan Martin's moved up into the top 6 now in the King of the Mountains, but that wasn't quite what he was planning, I don't think. Was this a counter move by Rafał Majka? 1 kilometre to go for Warren Barguil. He's behind that group, remember now.
But he's not looking to very much more than 40 or 45 seconds, and because of this young rider's ability on the descents, I could see him actually catching them back up before the start of the final climb of the day. Barguil, he would love to be a member of this group. He had a very nasty crash yesterday. Vincenzo Nibali, his face not showing any emotion at all here as he tries to ride himself back into the Tour de France. There's Alejandro Valverde moving up. There's Richie Porte. Richie Porte keeps ticking away there. He wants to grab himself a few points. He's obviously very, very keen to try and get himself points in the King of the Mountains competition. The acceleration there has put Andrew Talansky into difficulty again. Number 137 is Laurens ten Dam. Sammy Sanchez as well, but they're not losing that much as they start to get over the top of this climber. The yellow jersey group, they're picking up a little bit of a tailwind coming round the corner. I think there's too many points have gone away for Richie Porte, but he'll continue.
Here we have then Richie Porte here wearing the King of the Mountains jersey as he comes up towards the top, but of course it's Chris Froome in the lead and the race well split up. Micah has got the win over the top, and Martin is leading the second chase now, but gone over in 4th place. Chris Froome is leading the next group on the road, and Quintana is in there as well. So too Van Garderen, Contador, Nibali. So the boys that matter for the overall in Paris are all locked together here, all under the escort of Geraint Thomas.
Geraint Thomas, 5th overall in the standings. This is a little bit of damage being done at the back, but I just noticed Michael Rogers, Phil, he was in difficulty early on. He's recovered and he's getting back into this leading group with Alberto Contador. You can see Contador there on the right-hand side, that bobbing style of his up alongside Nairo Quintana. But the man who really lit the blue touch paper in the fireworks on the morning after the Bastille Day of France was Vincenzo Nibali and his team Astana.
Yes, it's nice to see Vincenzo recover from what he termed I was out of puff on the climbs yesterday, and he's now looking maybe a little bit stronger once more. Still lots of riders in all sorts of trouble here.
Well, Froome leads him over there, Phil. A little bit historic, by the way. The 80th inclusion of the Col de Tourmalet in the Tour de France, first introduced back in 1910. And of course, you know, it was Octave Lapise was the first man to go over the top on that occasion.
Yes, and sadly a victim of the World War. Now, the barren descent at the top of the Tourmalet, you've got to keep your concentration. Braking very hard for that right hand through on the adverse camber inside corner there. This is Richie Porte.
Well, once we get confirmation, I think Richie Porte might have picked up a couple of points there over the top of the climb, and that's what he would be looking for, because I think in the back of his mind now, Phil, Richie Porte is thinking, you know, I quite like this polka dot jersey.
Yes, it's on loan from Chris Froome just at the moment.
Yeah, now, the way it looked to me, Geraint Thomas pulled over and let Chris Froome pass, so Chris Froome picked up the most possible points in that chase group. So I must say, in my Tour de France history, I have never seen a yellow jersey actually paying attention to any other jerseys. Normally, they just go yellow and nothing else. And here we see Rafael Micah in a quite unusual but fast position.
Yeah, well, Chris has got 6 points on the climb there, and Richie Porte didn't get any. So it looks as though he might be going for the double this year. We'll see. Look at the, oh dear me, when the cameras give us a slow motion, that's a tight one.
Well, Rafael Micah, Phil, at the front of the race, he's got a very good advantage over everybody else, a good 5.5 minute lead, but he certainly needs to take a few risks. Well, we're a little bit further down the race here because at 31 kilometres to go, this is the young Frenchman, 23 years of age, Warren Barguil. He was involved in a very nasty crash yesterday. He's trying to catch back up to the yellow jersey group, which contains pretty much all of the pre-race favourites, including Chris Froome, who started the day in yellow, Richie Porte, and of course in there as well, Chris Froome, Vincenzo Nibali. Off the front of the main field, still by the 5.5 minutes advantage. You can hear the squeals coming in there from the motorbikes, trying to keep up here with Warren Barguil. The leading rider, Rafael Micah, is still 5.5 minutes ahead, with a number of riders stuck in the middle. So this is Micah getting down into a little precarious ski-like tuck position. That's to make himself as aerodynamic as possible to try and approach those speeds of around about 90 kilometers an hour in the straights. And once he feels that he's starting to slow down a fraction, he gets back into the saddle, gets the pace back up nice and high again. He's going to be a very difficult man to catch, because on the descent like this, he will be doing the same speed or maybe even a little bit faster. There you go, there's confirmation that he's touching just 80 kilometers an hour going down here. They won't, over the next 10 kilometers or so, have very much chance at all to pull back to him. So I think he's taken a pretty serious option on the stage victory today.
He's taking a lot of risk. He's absolutely screaming here through Bareja. Long, straight, high-speed drop. Everybody right to stand back.
Well, in fact, he's also, we're not getting the proper time check, but he's got himself a very good advantage over the second group on the road, which contains Dan Martin, Serge Pauwels and the rest. And they are still hovering at around about 2 minutes behind the lone leader. Now the race descent is not quite as technical as it was over the first 4 or 5 kilometres.
Oh, it's a super road. There is a nasty curly coming up too, in fact, but even so, this is a super descent here. But it's time to slam on the brakes for this one.
Yep, these corners, you've got to line yourself up quite properly. Nice to see Bauke Mollema here from Trek Factory Racing. He's stayed in contact. Oh, well, he's using the road.
Wow.
I suppose that brings a complete idea of just how much of the road you have to use around these descents. You get over to the opposite side and cut right across at the end.
Concentration all of the way. This is Demar coming back to the peloton.
Oh, there's a cow just in the road. I don't know if you saw that.
Boy,
that's what Race Radio was crackling about there. There was a cow coming across the road.
Oh boy, this is not the sort of hazard you want on the descent of the Tour de France at all.
Wow, and that is one of the white cows of the Bernays. And talk about poor old Warren Barguil. I don't know how he got through there, Phil, but that was almost a hamburger.
Well, I'll tell you, all the tours I've seen, I don't think I've ever seen that before. Well, it's been averted, and that's all that matters here as they continue on the way down. The breakaway now being picked up by the peloton, but the one man out front is still holding a very, very good lead.
Oh, well, a bit of excitement there with the cows of the Tour de France getting involved in the mix. Looking down there at this select group. A chance here to have a quick look at the riders in the group now. Alejandro Valverde down there. Back at the front, Rafael Majka has lost hardly any of his advantage over the yellow jersey group. Well, dropping down now, he's made his way through Barège for the lone leader. His advantage now is 2 minutes over a group, and we're still hearing there are 6 riders together. Morabito, Vogler, Martin, Simon, Bookman and Powles, and they had around about 2 minutes, and then it's 5 minutes and 10 seconds is the gap to the group containing Nibali, Kangat, Froome, Port and Thomas. And this is that group. Richie Port. Well, it's in fact being corrected by Race Radio, 5 minutes and 40 seconds. I think we're now here with Warren Barguil. Look at the risks he's taking going around these corners. He's a very, very good descender. Seen him win a couple of stages in the Tour of Spain when he was just 21 years of age. He knows that around these corners, this is the point where he's got to try and get himself back into that leading group or the leading group of contenders if he can. He can go around those maybe a couple of seconds faster than everybody else. He's now got about 35 seconds to make up. Now, in this part of the, we're looking at the way or looking at the attitude of that group of riders. They're not chasing hard. They're in fact slowing down a fraction now. This little bit of a pause might just be the moment when the young Frenchman Warren Barguil can get himself back into contact. Little chat there between Port and Chris Froome. It's too much time now back to try and make up to the leading lone rider, I think, Rafael Majka, but they may well be able to catch the riders who are caught halfway across the gap, although they've still got 3 minutes to make up. 25 kilometers to go. The lone leader now is still Rafael Majka, the Polish rider who last year won 2 stages of the Tour de France, one of them not too far away from here, the Pla d'Adet, and now looking as if he's got himself sails set high for a victory on today's stage. It's quite a longer drag up towards the finish line. In fact, the King of the Mountains point at the Côte de Courtrai is around about 2.5 kilometers from the finishing line, which is right in the heart of Courtrai. Some really nasty floods in Barège back in 2013, and the French government had to pay an awful lot of money to strengthen up the banks of the river to make it safer for the future. But this man He really is the great revelation of last year, and look at this position he's got himself into to push himself down at speeds of 72. He's been as high as 80 kilometres an hour going downhill.
Well, his season hasn't been good at all in the build-up for the Tour, and it wasn't good in the first few days of the Tour, but it's certainly good today. He saw the break, he went with it, he had his plan as he races into Barège with the peloton, as we do at the moment. And it looks as though, as they're not gaining any time at all on him, Paul, we're inside 25 to go. I think he's every chance now to win this stage.
Well,
now, is this Barguil coming back?
This is the kind of risks when you're 23 years of age and you're in the top 10 in the overall standing of the Tour de France that you are prepared to take. And he's going through here, Phil, at 50 miles an hour. He's leapfrogging from one car to the next as he makes his way up to the peloton. I take my hat off to this young man, because when I saw him at the side of the road yesterday, I thought his Tour de France was over.
Well, you said he could get back on the descent, and he has got back almost, as it runs down for quite a little way yet before we start the finishing climb up to Cauterets. And it's not a hard climb, it's not a major mountain, it's only third category. Oh boy, this is going to be a tight one, but he's made it on the outside of that motorbike.
I suppose, Phil, you could say, to be 23 years of age again, because he's showing no signs of fear at all, especially for a man who's had a couple of nasty crashes over the last couple of seasons. But when he won 2 stages in the Vuelta a España a couple of years ago, he was only 21 years of age, and now we're back with Majka. And in fact, that group behind Phil are starting to eat into his advantage, because Serge Pauwels, Race Radio has just said, is only 1 minute and 10 seconds behind him.
Well, Majka will know exactly where the chasers are now, because his team car will have been telling him that. He's looking for 20 kilometres to go very shortly. As I say, he comes over this little climb. It's called the Côte de Cauterets, which means a small hill. And once over the top, he's got 3.5 kilometres into the town itself for the finish. And so he'll continue to run down towards Luz Saint-Sauveur.
And he's just gone through Luz Saint-Sauveur, and he's about to move away from Luz Saint-Sauveur and start to line up towards Larize and Pierrefitte Nestalas, and that's where he's going to start the little ascent. It's more, as we get around there, that's Barguil. It's Andrew Talansky taking on board the last chance of some liquid refreshment before the final climb of the day, and gives you an idea there at the kind of speed that we are attaining going down these hills, close to 80 kilometres an hour. Laurens ten Dam, Warren Barguil, hats off to Warren Barguil, because he's made the junction with all of the other contenders. But again, he's going to have to line up for a very difficult day tomorrow as well.
So, well, tell us all about the Castle of Santa Maria, Paul.
Well,
do you know anything about it?
It goes back to the 12th century. In fact, the little church down there, by the way, is a beautiful Romanesque style. But for the main field today, it's a question of whether or not Serge Pauwels, the Belgian, can get himself back up to the leading rider, because we've seen a brilliant descent done by Rafael Majka, but Serge Pauwels is hanging on to a 1-minute deficit.
And that's the yellow jersey group. It has swollen with just 1 or 2 riders getting back after the descent of the Col de Tourmalet. This rider is still out front. Serge Pauwels is being shown at 1:14. We haven't got a camera with him, unfortunately. 2 minutes back to Dan Martin and Emmanuel Buchmann, and then it's a little bit further. We don't know how far back to Vauclair and Simon, with the peloton at 5:44. Here's Serge Pauwels.
Well, he really must be inspired, and as I've said, Phil, I can only find a single stage victory for this man over the years, and that was a stage of the Giro d'Italia. But what a victory that would be if he could catch the lone leader. And as we saw yesterday, Phil, that this race finishes with a climb, and he's climbing well.
He's climbing very well. He hasn't won a race, by the way, since 2009, and that was the only race he ever won. But what a race to win. Stage 15 of the Tour of Italy, the Giro d'Italia. Now, he's going to keep on digging in here. It would be an incredible result for MTN Qhubeka, the new team from Africa in the Tour de France.
You can see Dan Martin as we get onto the slopes of this climb. Well, he's left Emmanuel Buchmann behind.
Yes, Buckman is a real star of the future. That young man riding his first Tour and the only new professional in the Tour de France, and in at the kill on the stage in the Pyrenees. But now he's got to hang on and see if he can get fourth across the line, because Dan Martin is off again on his favourite terrain.
Well, Dan Martin used the slopes of the Col d'Aspin to ride across a 3-minute gap to get himself into the lead group on the moment at the time. Now he's going to hope that this final climb of the day, a 5-kilometre climb up to the Côte de Cotteret, will allow him to ride across the gap, first of all to Serge Pauwels. As we pull back here, we get a chance to see how much of a job he's doing, because he was initially a minute behind Serge Pauwels and 2 minutes behind Rafał Majka.
And there he is. It's a bit of a tall order. He could certainly reach Pauwels, but I don't think he'll reach the leader now, not with 7 kilometres left to ride. This is Richie Porte just guiding the heads of state through the valley and taking them towards the finishing line all together. And that's a day that they can tick off with a yellow jersey still on the shoulders of Chris Froome. Richie Porte, he's done another great job for the yellow jersey, as he's got to the front and controlled everything as we go into these protections for the road for when the weather conditions are bad. As we now see down below us here, the Tour de France going home to Cotteret.
And Dan Martin's done a great performance throughout the whole of today. You can see him coming across the gap. It's down to about 10 or 12 seconds. Just before he gets to the top of the climb, and look at the difference in the speed. Phil, we're looking down on the computer here. They're showing us that it's 22 kilometres an hour for Pauwels, 26 kilometres an hour for Dan Martin. Martin is doing a phenomenal job, but I think he's just left it once again a little bit too late to get himself up for the victory.
But for the second time this day, he's crossing a huge gap to get back up to the sharp end of the race. And as we come up towards the summit, it gets a little bit steep just as we go under the banner bridge, and it's only worth 2 points in the King of the Mountains. And Rafał Majka now, as the crowd cheered him up deep into the valley, and he concentrates, chops off the corners. Now, just at 1 kilometre to go is Serge Pauwels, and I reckon about 10 or 15 seconds at most behind him is Dan Martin. Now, that's a little bit at the end, and they still give it only third category, but it gets very steep just before we get under the banner here.
Well, just having a quick look down from the high spot here, you can see how difficult it is, that final few climbs. They call this Les Lacets de Cotteret, or the zigzags of Cotteret.
And look at this, the catcher's come. Is he going to jump him straight away? I think he is. He's not going to allow him time to recover. And Dan Martin has gone straight by Serge Pauwels with an incredible sprint.
Well, I have to say, Serge Pauwels was caught in no man's land for an awful long time, and he's got no more power to send down to the engine room this afternoon, and he is now very much in survival mode. But for Dan Martin, he would really like to try and catch back with the overall lead. I don't think he's going to do that, because a quick look at the clock says he's still looking to try and bridge a 2-minute gap to the leader, Rafał Majka.
Well, he's got that bobbing style, Dan Martin, once he gets his engines running here. And again, there's a point for second place up this mountain, so he continues to get some points in the King of the Mountains, maybe in the top 5 or 6 tonight. This rider, though, I think might be out of his reach. This is the top of the climb. He gets 2 points for the King of Mountains, and now he gets the pleasure of a quick run down into the finish.
And exactly that's what it is, because once he goes over the crest of this little Côte de Cotteret, it is a fast run down towards the finish. It's not steep at all anymore. It's slightly downhill to begin with over the top of this climb, and then he charges into the middle of town, and he won't have to worry too much about that 90-degree bend right after the finishing line.
Under 3 kilometres now. It's the long straight road to the beautiful town of Cotteret. It's only the 4th time we've come here. Miguel Indurain won a stage of the race in Cotteret before he started winning the Tour de France for 5 years in a row, when he never won a road race stage again during his reign as a Tour winner, but he certainly won the road race stage here on that occasion.
Well, Dan Martin is dreaming of pulling back a 1.5 minute gap, but you know, Phil, at 2.6 kilometres to go, that's a very tall ask of anybody. If it was the top of a 2.5 kilometre ascent towards the finish, he might be in with a slight chance of doing that today. But the fact is that Rafał Majka has gone over the crest of this hill, and he's got a very fast approach to the finish line now.
Continued to keep the group Maillot Jaune well away at 6:53. Majka is looking for the team's first stage win this year of the Tour de France. He had 2 in the mountains last year and won the King of the Mountains title. He started progressing in that competition too today. Now his rider has had a brilliant day out. He may have to be content with his second place of this year's Tour de France. He was second on the Mer de Huy, but what a great ride Dan Martin has done. Now 1 kilometre to go for Rafał Majka as he heads under that banner. Well, there's a bit of an attack here. This is Bauke Mollema, who's gone from the chase group at the moment for the Trek Factory team as he moves clear. Well, that's a cheeky move, but it's worth a few seconds possibly.
Well, it's always worth having a little crack down towards the end like this. Bauke Mollema is in 11th place overall. Quite surprising to see one Dutchman chasing another Dutchman.
Now, Richie Porte dropping off. He's done his job all day. That's to be expected. Thomas Voeckler, is that? No, that's Radder who's gone off there.
Well, you know, Richie Porte, job done for the day. Lawrence ten Dam slipping away. You know, this is the final little kicker. Michael Rogers has done his job as well. But the big names, they'll be keeping a very close eye on each other. And checking on this, this in fact is Sammy Sanchez. Andrew Talansky slipping away. And Nibali!
Oh, Nibali's in trouble here. He's got to get up the slopes just ahead of him, or his days that have been wasted is going to cost him time, and it's all by the attack of Bauke Mollema. Last year's winner caught out again. Sanchez has gone back round him.
Well, that is so very, very strange, the way the body of Vincenzo Nibali is reacting here, slipping away there. One of his teammates who did a lot of pacemaking early on, Tanel Kangat. Sammy Sanchez almost recovered a fraction here, and you've just got to be so attentive. Amazing to think that it was Vincenzo Nibali did most of the pacemaking on the Col de Tourmalet, and now all of a sudden on this little climb down towards the end, he's paid for all of those efforts.
Well, they gave it third category. I think that was a bit mean, quite honestly, because these curlies taking them up to the line are very steep indeed, and that's been proven now. They've cracked last year's winner of the Tour de France within 3.5 kilometres of the line. But let's go to the line now, because here's the man who's had a most brilliant day in the breakaway, which established around 76 kilometres in. So 110 kilometres up front for this rider today, a lot of it by himself. And he's going to give us, I hope, a 2-arm salute. He's going to give us a smile anyway, because he's put Tinkoff Saxo on the map today. It'll be his third stage career win. Just wisely checking over, make sure that nobody's creeping up. And remember, we've got the 2 nasty little flickers coming in to the finishing line. It won't cause him any problems. Now he sees the line. Yes, reminds us of his sponsor, and there's the sharp left as you cross the line. And he's got the stage win. Rafał Majka wins here in Cauterets. Now, is Dan Martin hung on for second?
Well, no problem at all with Dan Martin for second place. Serge Pauwels should be very comfortable, but what a great mover. You can see he tried everything here this afternoon.
Well, the clock's counting it down. A fantastic day out for the Irishman. One of the best rides of his life. He crossed the gap of 3.5 minutes to catch the breakaway. Only one man at the end of the day beat him to the draw. And as the clock ticks on, Daniel Martin gets his second place of this year's Tour de France. He matches the Mur de Bretagne with the giant climbs of the Pyrenees. It'll be just on a minute as he comes up to the finishing line.
But this man raced today's stage. He'll be able to talk about it as he comes up to get his second place of the Tour.
About 59 seconds for Martin on the line. Now, this rider has caused a little bit of dismay back in that group, which was nice and cosy. Heading, oh sorry, this we switched here now to Bachmann, Manuel Buchmann. What a great ride by this kid. He really is a kid. The only new professional in the race, and he's on a mountain day. He's crossed the line, I presume, in third place. I don't know where Serge Pauwels gone.
Well, Serge Pauwels was in third place on the road, but anyway, we'll check out on that. But Bauke Mollema is looking to try and break into the top 10 in the overall standings. He started the day in 11th place overall. We've seen a Vincenzo Nibali in difficulty. He may well be slotting into the top 10 overall. There's Serge Pauwels. He cracked a little bit down towards the end. He's going to finish it with 4th place on today's stage.
Yes, Buchmann got by him on the top of that climb, which really did hurt Serge, and from looking like a second place finisher, he's going to come over the line. Nonetheless, in a great result today for Serge Pauwels in 4th place, and a great result for MTN Qhubeka. Well taken attack. And this is still Bauke Mollema here, who's actually caused, it seems, Nibali to lose time on the run-in today, more time.
Yes, but you've got to admit, Phil, he was a big racer, and again back on the defensive. Chris Froome and Nibali lost some serious time once again, but he's raced. He went out there and tried to do the damage. He did the damage, but down towards the end he just had a little bit missing from his firepower of 12 months ago.
Being escorted by the only surviving teammate with him there, Kangert. This is Bauke Mollema coming over, still remains a top rider in the Tour de France. A few seconds will help him today. Froome group with all his main rivals around him, they'll keep the same time losses, and in fact it'll be more time losses for Nibali.
Well, Thomas Voeckler has survived a long day in the saddle for him, a stage that smiled on him in the past. It hasn't smiled on him here this afternoon, but once again he's proved that he can endear himself to the French crowds, as he's got Julien Simon who says, oh no, you crossed the line in front of us.
and I think Julien said, no, you can have it, or is he going to take him? He's trying to see what he's saying here. He pulls the best faces in the world, the best gurneys in the world, as he comes up towards the line here, Tommy Voeckler. I think it's 5th place for him now, and 6th for Simon. Good ride for Simon too.
Yeah, very impressive ride for those two riders to survive from that early morning breakaway. And Tony Galopin's now making a little move there in the red jersey of Lotto.
Well, a few seconds gained. He's got a lovely place overall at the moment. He could snick a few seconds.
Well, he's only 1 second behind Geraint Thomas in the overall standings, and that's what he's looking for today, to try and just leap over there.
Well, he's got it. That's a good second he's taken there as he starts his sprint for the line. And a good sign too, he's still up for the fight going into the 3rd day in the Pyrenees tomorrow. Remember that Tony Galopin was the only rider during the reign of Vincenzo Nibali to take the jersey off him and hand it back to him the next day.
Well, everybody now, Phil, starting to fight for their positions in the top 10 in the overall standings. Bauke Mollema we're looking at here from Trek Factory Racing. It looks as if Team Sky have taken a serious interest there in Tony Galopin. They're really starting to pull him back. They recognise this guy as a guy who is a little bit of an unknown quantity and quality when it comes up to big mountain stages.
It's Thomas who's doing the chase there and trying to stop him getting that second. They're fighting for everything, Team Sky.
In fact, I might have thrown you a wobbler there, because Galopin is about 20 seconds behind
that's a wobbler.
Geraint Thomas, so he's not too much to worry about. The relationship between Contador and Thomas was just the single second. But Bauke Mollema, well, he's looking to try and get himself into the top 10 in the overall standings when we readjust the Contador tonight.
So Bauke Mollema comes in and he crosses the line about 5-10 down. Alejandro Valverde is trying to do something, and Chris Froome's after him. He thinks, no, you're not going to take any time out of me. Well, he probably got a second on him, but that's nothing, as Froome chases home Alejandro Valverde. That was an incredible race again today, and Froome stays on top.
Well, the amazing thing is they've got to come out and do all of this again tomorrow, because tomorrow's stage is a massive Pyrenean stage one more time too, because tomorrow they go out from Lannemezan, go over the Col de Porte d'Aspet, the Col de la Cour, the Col de l'Ers, and then finish on the Plateau de Bay, a climb of 16 kilometers. Just a quick glimpse there of Vincenzo Nibali. He went out today and did a lot of work, a lot of hard work. He's got his teammate up alongside him, Tanel Kangert. That's Steve Morabito. He was in the breakaway very early on, but this has been another hard day for the man who is coming back here as the defending champion. Round the corner there really is a very tricky end to the stage as they make that sharp left-hand bend after the finishing line. So Majka a minute ahead of Dan Martin. Emmanuel Buchmann in third at 1:23, Pauwels in fourth, and Thomas Voeckler in fifth place overall. Move there by Alejandro Valverde, just 2 seconds ahead of Chris Froome. Clawing back a couple of seconds there. Froome in ninth place, once again being very attentive. Alberto Contador right on the wheel of Chris Froome, and that will give him a little bit of inspiration. Nice to see the South African coming up towards the front, South African national champion, Jans van Rensburg, with Lawrence Tendam, the rider from Lotto Jumbo. And they'll be quite happy, I think, with the performance today of Robert Hessink.
Lawrence Tendam coming in with Jacques Janse van Rensburg. The winner, though, Rafael Majka, gets his third stage win. It's only his second Tour de France. He's got 3 stages over those 2 tours now. And that was particularly good because after their disappointing day yesterday, when Contador could well have lost the Tour de France yesterday, they fought back with a good morale-boosting stage win. This man, for me, I wonder if they'll give him the red bib number for a great ride.
Well, it'll be difficult to choose who was the most aggressive rider on the stage, but he did a brilliant job. But you know, this man did a great job too. He was in the breakaway, waited for the right moment to move, and once he went over the top of the Col de Tourmalet, nobody was ever going to see him again. That's his third stage victory in the Tour de France at 2 participations.